Chapter 1001. With our current strength, it's not impossible to unite all the forces in the fringe. But if we fight them head-on, many of our brothers will die. It's not worth it, the bald man named Wang Wei scratched his head. But if we don't expand, there won't be enough people to build roads, bridges and houses. There's no need to rush. Li Yi patted his shoulder, gesturing for him to calm down. To resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify the internal affairs. One must take one step at a time and one must eat one bite at a time. The most important thing at the moment was to put an end to the chaos in Shu province. The bandits in the fringe weren't the priority, but the bandits in Shu province that needed to be dealt with urgently. Because from this day onwards, the entire Shu province was his territory. A mountain can only accommodate one group of bandits. Which bandits would allow other bandits to behave atrociously in their territory? Wang Chong knocked on the door and walked in. He bowed and greeted, "Greetings, Your Highness Jiang of Silla." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "No need for formalities. Thank you for your hospitality, Your Highness." Wang Chong calmed himself down and said, "The delivery has not arrived yet. I'm here to bid farewell to Your Highness Jiang of Silla." Wang Wei looked at him and said in surprise, "Hey, have we met somewhere before?" "Thank you, hero, for saving our lives." Wang Chong bowed respectfully and said, 3 months ago, we encountered a group of bandits while escorting the delivery. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid we wouldn't have survived until now. I seem to have some recollection." Wang Wei scratched his head. Recollection was just a courtesy. In the past 2 years they had saved many people from the bandits. How could they remember every single one of them? Although they were also bandits, they had their own rules. They were not allowed to attack the traveling merchants, nor were they allowed to harm the common people. Since they were not allowed to do this or that, they could only attack their peers. As a result, there were no more small bandits within a radius of several dozen li within their territory. They either banded together to fight against outsiders, or they latched onto the thighs of some large bandit group, making it difficult for them to act against them. This also caused their performance to plummet in the past few months. After thanking the baldy, Wang Chong suddenly knelt down in front of Li Yi and said, "Wang Chong requests Your Highness Jiang of Silla to take me in. In the future, I am willing to follow Your Highness' lead. Please get up." Li Yi personally helped him up and said, "Brother Wang has been delivering goods outside all year round, so he should be very familiar with Shuzhou. Maybe he will need your help in the future. If you don't mind, you can work here after this trip." Wang Chong excitedly kowtowed and said loudly, "Thank you, Your Highness." If he could get the protection of His Highness Jiang of Silla in Shuzhou as long as he did things honestly in the future, what was there to be afraid of? This escort trip was really worth it. As a newcomer, it was the time when he was most short of manpower. It was certainly a good thing to have the help of someone familiar with Shuzhou. After Wang Chong left, the chief official of Shuzhou came in and bowed. "Your Highness, the county magistrate of Yong County has been seriously injured by the angry people. I have just sent him to the medical center for treatment." Li Yi nodded and said, "After the injury is healed, convict him one by one and then punish him according to the law." Then he looked at him and asked, "What do you think about the management of the bandits in Shuzhou?" The chief official of Shuzhou thought for a moment and said, "Your Highness, Shuzhou is adjacent to the chaotic land. The bandits have been going on for decades. It is hard to imagine that it is difficult to control them comprehensively. In recent years, the government has encircled them dozens of times, but every time there is a move, they will flee to the chaotic land. When the storm subsides, they will come out and continue to commit crimes. We can do nothing." "You mean we're just going to let it go?" "I absolutely don't mean that." Hearing this, the chief official of Shuzhou immediately said, "I just think that this matter involves a lot of things and needs to be considered at length." Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Summon all the officials above the 8th rank in the 7 counties. I want to see them at the Yong County government in 5 days." Although he did not know why His Highness summoned the officials of Shuzhou with such great fanfare, the chief official of Shuzhou immediately bowed and said, "Yes, Your Highness." If he wanted to develop Shuzhou, he had to solve the problem of corrupt officials and bandits first. Li Yi already had a plan in mind. Then he suddenly turned around and picked up Yong Ning, who was quietly approaching him from behind. He gently pinched her nose and said, "You are getting worse and worse. You want to sneak attack me again." Yong Ning said with some frustration, "I was discovered by my brother again." Recently, Yongning had been learning martial arts from Mississippi Lu. Of course, she was only learning some basic things now. She was young and had strong adaptability. Moreover, she had Mississippi Lu to teach her, and there were 3 supreme masters at home who could consult her at any time. It was likely that when she grew up, there would be another independent heroine in Wulin. Li Yi helped her tidy up her messy hair and said, "You are still too young. When you grow up, your brother won't be able to discover it." Sister Rui also said the same. Yongning nodded vigorously and said, "She said that my brother is the laziest and always doesn't practice martial arts. If I work hard to learn martial arts when I grow up, my brother will not be my opponent." A few black lines appeared on Li Yi's forehead. She actually talked bad about him to Yongning when he was not there. This Rui was too outrageous. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "What else did she say?" "She also said that when that time comes, I will be able to spank my brothers but like her." Yongning hugged his neck and said, "I can't bear to spank my brother's butt. I want to learn martial arts well so that I can protect my brother in the future." Although Yongning was still protecting him as usual, Li Yi had enough vigilance in his heart. Yongning was still young and pure like a piece of white paper. What she would become in the future depended on how they smeared this piece of white paper. Li Yi went to smear it carefully himself, so he naturally would not worry. Girls were always likable. In terms of likability, even Li Duan could not compare to her. Drunken Imo taught her how to draw and dance. Ruoqing taught her how to read and play musical instruments. Rui told her stories and treated her like a daughter. They had all added some color to this piece of white paper. However, if Mississippi Lu had to add a few strokes on this piece of paper from time to time, things would not be good. One Lu Rui was enough in the family. There must not be another Rui. Li Yi pinched her little face and said, "Cinny, you must remember to listen to Sister Rui more in the future. Listen to Sister Ruoqing and Sister Drunken Imo more. Also, remember to stay away from Sister Rui." Yongning blinked her eyes at him and asked, "Why?" Li Yi looked at her and guided her patiently, "Because Sister Rui always spank my brother's butt. Anyone who spank my brother's butt is a bad person." Yongning looked at him, then looked behind her and asked, "Sister Rui, is brother right?" Li Yi was stunned. Then he gently flicked her forehead and said, "Little girl, when did you learn to lie? It's wrong to lie. Remember, don't lie in the future." A cold voice came from behind him. "Lying is wrong, but is it right to speak ill of people behind their backs?" Chapter 1002. What bad words? Li Yi turned to look at Mississippi Lu and asked in surprise, "When did you come, Rui?" "Not too early." Mississippi Lu hugged her sword and said, "When you asked Cinny to stay away from me." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "You're kidding. Why would I say something like that?" Sister Rui spanked brother's butt. Yongning looked at him and reminded, "Brother said that those who spanked others were bad people, so Sister Rui is a bad person. Kids shouldn't listen to what others say." Li Yi looked at her and said seriously, "Spanking is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love. Family should love each other. If Cinny is disobedient, Sister Rui will spank Cinny's butt too. That's also a sign of love." Yongning immediately covered her butt and took a few steps back. She looked at Mississippi Lu and asked, "Then Sister Rui spanked brothers but because he was disobedient?" Li Yi thought to himself that kids were so naive. Mississippi Lu spanked him not because he was disobedient, but because he asked for it. Yongning looked at Rui and said pitifully, "Cinny will be obedient. Sister Rui, please don't spank Cinny's butt, okay? Spanking is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love." Mississippi Lu held her sword with one hand and held Li Yi's shoulder with the other. She said, "Let's go over there. Let me love you." Li Yi wanted to move her hand away. He shook his head and said, "There's no need for that. I'm your brother-in-law. It's not good for others to see." No matter how much strength he used, the hand on his shoulder did not move at all. Mississippi Lu smiled and said, "You're welcome. We're a family, so we should love each other. Spanking is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love." Yongning stood where she was and watched the two of them enter another courtyard. She mumbled, "Is Sister Rui spanking brother because she loves him? Your Sister Rui spanked your brothers but not because she loved your brother, but because your brother loved her." Fong, who was squatting at the door, shook his head and looked at her. "You're still young. You'll know these things when you grow up." While Mississippi Lu was doting on Li Yi in the courtyard, the chief officer of Shu province had just entered the provincial governor's mansion. Obviously, as soon as he arrived in Shuzhou, he encountered bandits and saw the collusion between the Yongzhou County magistrate and the bandits. His Highness Jiang of Silla was really angry, and he was determined to eliminate the bandits in Shuzhou. It was good that His Highness Jiang of Silla had such thoughts, but he had been in Shuzhou for many years. No one knew better than him how serious the bandits in Shuzhou were. Not to mention the fact that there were as many bandits as there were hairs on a cow. It would take a lot of manpower and resources to completely eliminate them. He also didn't know if the county magistrates could afford it. Just talking about the collusion between officials and bandits, the yamen was a den of bandits and a protective umbrella for some bandits. This was a huge obstacle to this matter. The various yamens in the 7 counties of Shuzhou were more or less involved in this kind of thing. When His Highness Jiang of Silla issued the decree, the people below responded passively for various reasons. Just like the previous times when they tried to suppress the bandits, it was impossible to achieve any results. His Highness Jiang of Silla would lose face if he failed to suppress the bandits. He might vent his anger on them. There was currently no provincial governor in Shuzhou. As the chief officer, he was temporarily in charge of all affairs. Naturally, he wanted to be promoted to a higher position. If he messed up this first task and angered Jiang of Silla, it would not be a good thing. Putting aside the success of suppressing the bandits for the time being, Her Highness had ordered that all officials of the 7th and 8th rank and above should appear in the Yong County government 5 days later. He had to handle this matter properly. As soon as he entered the magistrate's office, he ordered the advisor who came to greet him, "Send someone to send a message to the other 6 districts immediately. Inform all officials above rank 8 to appear in the Yong County magistrate's office within 4 days. This is an order from King Jing. Anyone who disobeys will be severely punished." The advisor immediately nodded. "Yes, Your Excellency. I will arrange it immediately." In addition to Yong County, there were 6 other counties under the jurisdiction of Shu Province. Because of their remote location, the areas of these counties were much larger than ordinary counties. However, if one rode a fast horse from Yong County to the farthest county, Ji County, it would take them a day to get there. Ji County Yamen. The magistrate of Ji County had just sent off the messenger from Yong County. When he walked back to the yamen, his expression was a little ugly. This Jiang of Silla had only arrived in Shuzhou for a day. Why did he want to summon everyone? What was he planning? He had just asked the messenger indirectly. This time, Jiang of Silla had summoned all the officials of the 8th rank and above from the 7 counties to discuss the suppression of the bandits. If the bandits in Ji County were really suppressed, he would lose his most important source of income. How would he be able to marry a 7th concubine? Your Excellency, don't worry. When the king of Shu was still alive, he also suppressed the bandits a few times. Over the years, he has suppressed the bandits many times. Beside him, a man with a goatee said with a smile, "Different situations call for different actions. If they want to suppress the bandits, we just have to cooperate. As for whether or not we can succeed, that will depend on the will of the heavens. You don't know." The magistrate of Ji County shook his head and said, "This Jiang of Silla is not an ordinary person. It's best to be careful. Send someone to tell Lu Huzi to stay put for the time being. It's best if he stays in his nest and doesn't come out. Otherwise, if anything happens, don't blame me for not showing mercy." "All right, I will inform him immediately. Also," the magistrate of Ji County thought for a moment and said, "Make some preparations. I have to leave for Lin County immediately. This time I still have to discuss this with Huang. I will send someone to inform Magistrate Huang first. Go." In a forest somewhere in Ji County, more than a dozen thatched cottages were scattered in picturesque disorder. At this moment, in an empty space in front of the thatched cottages, a man with a big beard looked at his subordinates opposite him and frowned. "Look at how scared you all are. It's just a few words from outside and you're already so scared. How much money has that Wei guy taken from us all these years? If we're done for, he'll be done for too. Would he dare to suppress us?" "But big brother, I heard that this time the authorities are serious. Put your hearts back in your stomachs. We're in the same boat as that Wei guy. Instead of worrying about the authorities suppressing the bandits, we might as well worry about encountering those baldies again." At the mention of baldies, some people's faces immediately turned pale. When it came to suppressing bandits, they should be the ones who should be suppressed the most. They were a bunch of immoral beasts. They had no bottom line, so much so that they even robbed their peers. Robbing them once was not enough, and they could still find them even after they moved 3 times. Each time they would rob the entire stronghold clean. It even gave people the feeling that they were the pigs and sheep that were being reared by those baldies. Every once in a while they would have to go through that kind of painful experience. The man with the big beard thought about it and said, "No, we still have to inform others about this matter. If the authorities want to play, then we'll play with them." The chief clerk of Shuzhou was very reliable. When the 5 days were up, Li Yi arrived at the Yong County government. Of the 7 counties in Shuzhou, except for the county magistrate who was still recuperating from his injuries in prison, none of the officials from the other counties were missing. "Greetings, His Highness Jiang of Silla." As he approached the yamen, the people opposite him immediately bowed to him. "Dispense with the formalities." Li Yi waved his hand and asked, "Do you know why I called all of you here today?" The person at the front nodded and bowed. "Your Highness, Chief Clerk Zhao has already told us that His Highness Jiang of Silla has summoned us here because of the bandits in Shuzhou." "That's right." Li Yi nodded and said, "The bandits in Shuzhou are serious. The bandits are rampant and lawless, and the people have no way to live. It should be the responsibility of the local officials like you to clean up the bandits and stabilize the law and order. With the situation in Shuzhou, you are duty-bound. Of course, I summoned you here today not to punish you for your crimes." As soon as these words came out, all the officials present were relieved. They were really afraid that this His Highness Jiang of Silla would punish them indiscriminately. After all, many people had done this in the past. Now it seemed that His Highness Jiang of Silla was worthy of Jiang of Silla. He was so reasonable that it was touching. "I can let bygones be bygones, but as the parents of the Shu prefecture, you are paid by the imperial court. You should also take responsibility." Li Yi glanced at the crowd and slowly said, "From today on, in the territory of Shuzhou, if the property of the people is robbed, all the losses will be compensated by the local officials. When the property is recovered, it will be returned to the local officials to make up for the losses." When the officials heard this, they were all stunned. The local officials will pay for the losses of the people's property first. The officials will take the blame for the crimes committed by the bandits. Is there such a reason in the world? Is there any law? Chapter 1003. Your Highness, this. The expression of an official at the front of the crowd changed. He said, "It doesn't make sense for the government to pay for the losses caused by the bandits." County Magistrate Wei's words struck a chord in the hearts of the crowd. Officials could not be bullied like this. How were they supposed to investigate if someone lied about the losses? Even if the commoners really suffered losses due to the bandits, they should not be the ones paying for it. They would not be able to afford it if this dragged on. Most importantly, they could control the bandits they were supporting, but they could not control all the bandits. Li Yi looked at the middle-aged official and asked, "You are?" The official immediately said, "I am County Magistrate Wei Dupeng of Ji County." "County Magistrate Wei, do you have a problem with I wouldn't dare." The County Magistrate of Ji County panicked. He immediately said, "I just feel that the bandits in Shu province are very serious. Although the government is also responsible, there has never been a precedent of officials paying for the losses of the commoners. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. We should consider this matter at length." "What do you mean by at length?" "I think," Li Yi suddenly asked, "where is the County Magistrate of Ji County?" The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then someone immediately walked out from the crowd and said respectfully, "Your Highness Jiang of Silla, I am the County Magistrate of Ji County. From now on you are the County Magistrate of Ji County." Li Yi said to him. He pointed at the County Magistrate of Ji County and said, "Arrest Wei Dupeng. As a County Magistrate, you have been passive in suppressing the bandits. I suspect that you are in cahoots with the bandits of Ji County. You will be dealt with after the investigation." 2 armored guards immediately stepped forward and arrested the County Magistrate of Ji County. The County Magistrate of Ji County was stunned. His expression changed drastically as he immediately said, Your Highness, I have been wrongly accused." "Wrongly accused?" Li Yi looked at the newly promoted County Magistrate of Ji County and asked. "He says he has been wrongly accused. What do you think?" "Your Highness, I don't." The County Magistrate of Ji County thought for a moment and suddenly bowed. Your Highness Jiang of Silla, I have a report. The former county magistrate of Ji County, Wei Depeng, colluded with the infamous bandit Lu Huzi of Ji County and allowed Lu Huzi and his men to commit crimes in Ji County. They harmed the people of Ji for profit for several years. I have evidence. Please, Your Highness Jiang of Silla. The Ji County magistrate's face paled. He pointed at Qin Yi and stammered, "You're slandering me." His voice became softer and softer and his face turned ashen. He did not expect King Jing to act so decisively and take him down at the slightest disagreement. He also did not expect that there would be a traitor by his side who would betray him at such a crucial moment. The county magistrate of Ji County was quickly taken away. From then on, the county magistrate of Yong County was no longer as lonely in prison. The county magistrate of Ji County was quickly taken away. From then on, the county magistrate of Yong County was no longer as lonely in prison. Li Yi glanced at the crowd and asked, "Does anyone else think what I said was inappropriate?" More than 20 officials looked around. After a moment, they bowed at the same time and said in unison, "Your Highness is wise." The county magistrate of Ji County had only spoken the truth, but he had been stripped of his official hat and thrown into prison. Who would dare to say anything else? Who would dare to object? Jiang of Silla was obviously not as kind as he looked. He had only been in Shuzhou for a few days, and 2 county magistrates had already been taken down. Who knew if they would be next? Li Yi shook his head and said, "It's okay. If there are any problems we can discuss them together. Only with discussion can we make progress. Speak freely. I won't blame you." One of the officials thought for a moment and carefully stepped forward. He said, "Your Highness Jiang of Silla, you are, The official subconsciously wanted to answer, but he seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed and he suddenly clutched his stomach. He said, "I have an unbearable stomach ache. Can I go to the toilet first? People have 3 urgent needs." "Go." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Does anyone else have any objections?" The crowd was silent. If it had not been for what had happened just now, they might have thought that His Highness Jiang of Silla was reasonable and open-minded. But now they would not fall for such a clumsy trap unless there was something wrong with their brains. One of the officials smiled and said, "Your Highness is wise. I admire you. I have no other objections." Bootlicka disgusting. Behind him, a person looked at him with an extremely disdainful gaze. The person walked forward and bowed. "Your Highness's plan is flawless. This lowly official's admiration for Your Highness is like a surging river, unending. I have no objections." "I have no objections either. Since no one has any objections, then this matter is settled." Li Yi looked at them and said, "You go back to your districts immediately. I will inform you in 2 days as to how to suppress the bandits." Seeing His Highness Jiang of Silla walking out of the county office, the crowd let out a long sigh of relief. An official suddenly turned around and looked at another person with a bright smile on his face. He said, "Magistrate Zhang, we have been colleagues for so long and haven't had a good gathering. Why don't we go back together? I will hold a banquet at Spring Fragrance House tonight. Magistrate Fong, we haven't had a drink together for a long time. Let's have a good drink today. Lord Go, it's my fault for offending you in the past. I will hold a banquet at home tomorrow. You must do me the honor." On the way back, Fong asked with a puzzled face, "Young master, there are not many good people among these officials. Why don't you kill them all? Why keep them alive?" When Fong was smart, he was like a fox who could see through the world and experience the vicissitudes of life. When he was stupid, he was like a stupid fox. When they first arrived in Shuzhou, the biggest problem they faced was that there was no one they could use. To replace all the officials in Shuzhou was a simple matter for him. But after replacing them, would he let Fong be the county magistrate? These people could pass through layers of selection in the imperial examination and sit in the position of county magistrate. Which one of them did not have some real ability? Moreover, they had been in Shuzhou for many years. No one knew everything about Shuzhou better than them, and no one was more suitable to sit in this position than them. Of course, the premise was that they were obedient. This time, the removal of the county magistrates of Yong County and Ji County should give them peace for a while. In the future, things could be done step by step. They could not be rushed. He looked back at Fong and said, "Go get Wang Wei for me." Not long after, a bald head appeared in front of Li Yi. Wang Wei scratched his head and asked expectantly, "Your Highness, what can I do for you? Don't you need people to repair roads and build houses?" Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Put the matter of the fringe aside for now. I will leave the bandits in Shuzhou to you this time." Wang Wei was stunned for a moment, then exclaimed in joy, "We can move out on a large scale? Just pick 100 brothers. I will ask the Lu League to help you. This time, none of the bandits in Shuzhou will be left alive. Don't worry, Your Highness." Wang Wei patted his chest, his eyes glowing. "How can we let these small fries mess around in our territory? This time we will rob them along with their money. After feeding them for so long, it's time to pull in the net." Chapter 1004. The county magistrate of Yong County was convicted of colluding with bandits, taking bribes, misappropriating public funds for personal use, and accepting bribes, a total of 18 crimes. He was dismissed from his post, his property confiscated, and sentenced to exile. The county magistrate of Ji County allowed bandits to commit crimes and colluded with officials and bandits. He was also dismissed from his post and detained. His fate would not be any better than that of the county magistrate of Yong County. As soon as the news spread, many people in the two counties applauded and cheered. As the parent officials of the two counties, not only did they not uphold justice for the people, but they colluded with bandits to bring harm to the people, causing unrest in the areas under their jurisdiction. The people were full of complaints. They only had themselves to blame for what happened today. It was also what the people of the two counties had been looking forward to for a long time. All of this was thanks to His Highness Jiang of Silla, who had just arrived in Shuzhou not long ago. As soon as he arrived in Shuzhou, he arrested 2 corrupt officials in a thunderous manner. He also strictly ordered the local authorities to arrest bandits and maintain law and order, returning Shuzhou to a clear and bright sky. In just 2 short incidents, he had won the love and support of the people of Shuzhou in a very short period of time. Compared to the king of Shu, who only knew how to plunder the wealth of the people and harm the people, Jiang of Silla was undoubtedly thousands of times better. Even when comparing the two of them, people would feel that it was an insult to His Highness Jiang of Silla. They were both kings, but why was there such a huge difference between them? They had been looking forward to such a wise ruler for many years. Their days in the future should be much better. The people were in a good mood and their faces were full of smiles. During their leisure time, the topic of conversation would always be His Highness Jiang of Silla, who was praised by countless people. It was said that he was handsome and had a jade-like appearance. He was one of the most handsome men in the world. It was said that he was brilliant in literature and could speak eloquently. He was recognized as the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom. It was said that he was skilled in martial arts and was a hero of the world who was skilled in both literature and martial arts. He was refined, humble, and wise. When dealing with bad people, he was decisive, resolute, and merciless. He was His Highness Jiang of Silla. He was such a noble and pure person. In the private courtyard, Li Yi held Ruoqing's waist and said, "Move a little more." "Yes, yes, just like that." Ruoqing's face was red as she bit her rosy lips. The numbness coming from her waist made it difficult for her to calm down. Correcting Ruoqing's movements, he walked over and patted drunk Mo's but saying, "You need to perk up a little more here. Practicing martial arts is just like you guys dancing. In addition to practicality, you also pay great attention to aesthetics." Drunk Ink was not as reserved as Ruoqing. When no one was paying attention, she pinched his waist, rolled her eyes at him and ran to Ruoqing's side. Although he hadn't been able to give her a formal wedding ceremony, they were only one step away from each other. After the new mansion was renovated, it would be time to return what he owed her. Everyone in the Li family practiced martial arts now. Of course, it was different from Mississippi Lu's original intention to pursue the end of martial arts. Yong Ning wanted to learn martial arts well so that she could protect him in the future. Drunk Mo and Ruoqing wanted to practice martial arts because they heard that practicing that kind of martial arts could delay aging and maintain eternal youth. Few women could resist the temptation of these words. Of course, Li Yi also hoped that they could learn a little martial arts. On the one hand, they could protect themselves, and on the other hand, they could strengthen their bodies and prolong their lives. Their bodies were weak, and he did not expect them to practice martial arts well like Mississippi Lu to bully him every day. As long as they could have some ability to protect themselves and strengthen their physique, Li Yi would be satisfied. Walking to Mississippi Lu's side, he had just raised his hand when she looked over. Li Yi immediately waved his hand and said, Rui, your movements are very standard. There's no need to correct me at all. Yongning's horse stance was already very stable. She was still at the stage of practicing the basic skills, so her movements were not very standard. Li Yi stood opposite her, made a standard horse stance and said, "Look, horse stance like me." "What do you mean like you? Don't lead the children astray." Mississippi Lu walked over from behind, pressed his shoulder and kicked his butt, saying, "Press your butt down a little more, a little more." Li Yi rubbed his butt and whispered, "Can you be gentler, gentler?" Mississippi Lu looked at him and said, "Why don't we go to the yard next door and you tell me how to be gentle?" It was better not to go to the yard next door. It was a public place and people would gossip if they saw it. More importantly, he could not bear Mississippi Lu's gentleness and love. Li Yi shook his head, looked at Yongning and said, "Remember, you have to listen to Sister Rui. Press down a little more." In a small yard, third Miss Chen poured a cup of tea for him and asked softly, "How are things going recently?" Li Yi nodded and said, "Everything is going well. Some things can't be rushed, so let's take one step at a time." Beating corrupt officials and eliminating bandits was the first step to governing Xuzhou. The fall of the two county magistrates of Yong County and Ji County served as a warning to others. All the government offices in Xuzhou were extremely responsible and serious about suppressing bandits. In a short period of time, the suppression of bandits had achieved remarkable results. A large part of the reason was that the government had gone from indulging the bandits to not indulging them, so a large number of bandits no longer dared to act rashly. In other words, the so-called government and bandits could all be easily dealt with in this way. What came next could not be rushed. The bandits had to be eliminated bit by bit, so they just had to wait patiently. It was just that there were too many chores that needed to be taken care of every day. Everything in Xuzhou required his approval, and he was even busier than when he was in the capital. This was not what he wanted. The position of provincial governor of Xuzhou could not be left empty. He needed to find a capable person to take it, but the problem was that he did not have anyone under him who could be qualified to be a provincial governor. Should he ask Li Xian to send a reliable person over when he wrote a letter next month? "Lift your foot." Qin Chong held a broom in his hand and swept along the way. He glanced at Li Yi and said indifferently, "The third mistress did not ask him to arrange too many servants here." Even the dignified Qin Chong now had to occasionally do some sweeping and desk work. "You have done well on this matter," Qin Chong said casually as he swept. "Most of the bandits in Xuzhou are raised by the government. As long as the government does not condone them, half of the bandits will be gone." He swept his gaze over Li Yi's feet and said, "However, there are still some rules that are not perfect. There have already been a few cases of merchants making false reports of losses. If we do not do anything about it and hold on to the government, it will cause the officials in Xuzhou to panic and have the opposite effect." Li Yi took a sip of tea and asked with interest, "Then what do you think we should do?" "After this incident, the collusion between the government and bandits will no longer exist. We should focus on eliminating the remaining bandits. The officials in Xuzhou cannot bear any more pressure. We should focus on appeasing them. It is impossible that you do not understand the principle of having a stick in one hand and a jujube in the other." And then, when you said govern just now, you have to govern as well as manage. Xuzhou is located in a remote area and is relatively far from the capital, but it is a rare commercial center. Countless merchants from many countries pass through this place. It is a pity that the officials in Xuzhou are blinded by some small profits. Anything else? Its geographical location is blessed by the heavens. If we can eliminate the bandits in Xuzhou, clean up the government and have a long-term vision, attract merchants from all countries to come here, encourage the people to focus on agriculture and promote production. In at most a decade, this place will become the second capital. Li Yi put down his teacup and looked at Qin Chong as if he was looking at a piece of gold covered in dust. As expected, an old fox was an old fox. For him to be able to get to this position, he definitely did not rely on pulling strings. When he thought of this, he realized that Qin Qing from the Qin clan was definitely not someone who was easy to deal with. After all, to be able to get to the position of a servant, it was not possible to rely on pulling strings. Li Yi looked at him and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Official Qin." Qin Chong gripped the broom, a hint of wariness appearing on his face. He asked, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing much, I just want to ask." Li Yi looked at him and asked, "Do you desire power?" Chapter 1005. What power? Qin Chong held the broom in his hand and looked at him. For some reason, when he saw the kind smile on his face, his hair stood on end. The Qin family was once prominent and ranked as a duke. Lord Qin, you were also an official in the Minister of State. You were glorious and had a bright future. Li Yi shook his head and sighed. But now you can only sweep the courtyard with a broom. Have you ever thought? Of course I have thought about it. Qin Chong glanced at him and said, this is all because of you. The reason the Qin family has fallen to such a state and the reason I have to sweep the courtyard with a broom is all because of you. Li Yi raised his teacup and put it down. He thought for a moment and said, I'm not talking about who or who. I'm saying, are you really willing to go from being an official in the court to only being able to sweep the courtyard? I am willing. Qin Chong poured a cup of hot tea for third young lady Qin and calmly said, I'm getting old. As long as I can live a stable life, it doesn't matter if I'm an official or sweep the courtyard. In my opinion, sweeping the courtyard is more leisurely. Not thinking about progress, he was not thinking about progress at all. In any case, he had come from the House of Duke and had sat in one of the most popular positions in the court. At his age, his career path was the smoothest and his future was the brightest. He should be the most ambitious and ambitious. Dong Wenyun had already reached the position of prime minister at his age. And yet he only thought about sweeping the courtyard? He only wanted to be leisurely? Degenerate. Although life is full of ups and downs, we cannot forget to struggle. Old steeds are still in the stable and have great ambitions. Martyrs in their twilight years still have great ambitions. Xianxia became prime minister at the age of 80. Sun Wukong went on a pilgrimage to the west at the age of 500. And Bai Suzhen only descended the mountain to fall in love at the age of 1000. Li Yi shook his head and said, Lord Qin, you are just over 40, not even half of Jiang Taigong's age. How can you be so depressed? I have a position of provincial governor here, 3 levels higher than your previous position. Are you interested? Although he had a lot of power and could directly participate in national affairs, his official position was not high. He was only a 5th-rank official. The provincial governor of Shu province was a 4th-rank official, which was 3 ranks higher than him. When Shu province was promoted from a lower province to a higher province, his official rank would be unimaginable. Not interested. Qin Chong shook his head, his face expressionless as he picked up his broom and walked into the courtyard. Li Yi stood up and said, think about it. I won't consider it, Qin Chong said decisively. Just take it as helping me out. I'm not helping. Compared to being a provincial governor, I prefer sweeping the courtyard. We're all friends, give me some face. Does His Highness Jiang of Silla still need others to give him face? These were words that went against his heart. When Li Yi had brought up this matter, he had clearly seen the glint in Qin Chong's eyes. How could a person who had lived a glorious life, a person who could summon the wind and summon the rain in court, fall so low that he liked sweeping the courtyard? Qin Chong was undoubtedly the most suitable person for this position. He had the ability and experience. His only flaw was that he had once made a serious political mistake. However, this was not important. He was the great Jiang of Silla, magnanimous and magnanimous. How could he not even have this little bit of tolerance? The problem was that Qin Chong didn't seem to give him much face. Li Yi looked at him and asked, I'll ask you one last time. Will you accept the position of provincial governor? No. Qin Chong turned his head, a mocking smile on his face. So what if it was Jiang of Silla? Even Jiang of Silla would have a time when he would beg him. Li Yi shook his head and indifferently said, then don't blame me for being impolite. Qin Chong was disdainful of this. If he didn't want to become provincial governor, could it be that he could suppress him? Li Yi no longer paid attention to Qin Chong. He turned around and looked at third young Miss Qin, saying, Mother. Third young Miss Qin smiled and nodded. She raised her head to look at Qin Chong and gently said, Second brother, Lord Qin, Provincial Governor Qin, I'll go back and issue a decree. You can take up your post tomorrow. On the issue of Xuzhou, Li Xian had given him a lot of freedom. From the position of provincial governor to that of local officials, he didn't need to go through the procedures of the Ministry of Personnel. He looked at the broom in Qin Chong's hand and said, Of course, if you like sweeping, you can continue this hobby after you become provincial governor. No one will stop you. See you later. Li Yi waved at him again and walked out of the courtyard. Qin Chong threw down the broom and walked to sit beside third young Miss Qin. He poured himself a cup of tea and gulped it down. he said with some dissatisfaction. Miao Yu, you spoil him too much. Third young Miss Chen smiled and said, if I don't say anything, how can second brother find a way out of this embarrassing situation? Qin Chong's face turned red. Miao Yu, what do you mean by that? Nothing. I'm going to take up my post tomorrow. Second brother should make some preparations. She stood up with a smile and said, I'm going to see my precious grandson. The Li family is still lacking in numbers. It would be great if Ruoqing and Zueyamo could add 2 more members to the family. She quickly walked out of the courtyard, leaving only Qin Chong sitting there, his face alternating between red and white. In the short span of half a month, the problem of banditry in Shuzhou had been brought under control. Even the local people of Shuzhou would not believe such a thing, let alone others. Shuzhou had been plagued by banditry for decades. The previous provincial governor had dealt with it, the previous provincial governor had dealt with it, and the previous provincial governor had dealt with it. Even that good-for-nothing king of Shu had symbolically dealt with it twice. But in the past few decades, no matter what the government did or what measures they took, it was only a temporary achievement. The effect was very small, and it could not be compared to the effect of His Highness Jiang of Silla's suppression of banditry. His Highness Jiang of Silla had ordered that if the people suffered losses due to banditry, the local government would pay for it in advance. Everyone knew that in these days, the government was a den of banditry. Just this rule alone had eliminated half of the banditry in Shuzhou. Of course, there were also people who took advantage of the situation. A few people with bad intentions took the opportunity to falsely report their losses to the government. After being found out, they were severely beaten dozens of times. They were unanimously spurned by the people, and such things rarely happened again. The situation in Shuzhou had really changed a lot recently. In the past, people in Shuzhou would be in danger of encountering banditry even if they walked on the official road in broad daylight, let alone walking at night. Now, when banditry walked on the mountain road in Shuzhou, they had to worry about whether there were soldiers lying in ambush in the bushes beside them. When they saw pedestrians walking alone, they had to think carefully about whether they were bait thrown out by the government or a hero with unparalleled martial arts skills, using himself as bait and waiting for them to walk into the trap. For a moment, the banditry in Shuzhou was in a state of panic and everyone was in danger. They could not live on like this anymore. In a mountain village in Ji County, a thin man rushed into a room and said to the one-eyed man sitting in a seat in panic, "Big brother, bad news. We've been surrounded." "What?" The one-eyed man immediately stood up and said angrily, "We haven't done business for a few months. Do the government have nothing better to do? Why are they here to cause trouble for us?" The thin man panted and said, "No, it's not the government." "It's not the government?" The one-eyed man sat down again and asked, "Then is it Wang Er Motzi or Li Er Guzi who came to snatch our territory? Did these two F***ers eat bear's heart and leopard's gall?" The thin man patted his chest and said, It's not." The one-eyed man suddenly slammed the table and said angrily, "It's not this and it's not that. Who is it? Finish it all at once." Only then did the thin man calm down and say, It's those baldies." "What?" The one-eyed man stood up from the chair again and quickly fell back down. He asked, What did you say?" The thin man said sadly, "Big brother, those baldies are here again." At that moment, dozens of people were blocking the entrance of the village. A strong bald man held a cone-shaped paper tube in his hand and shouted, "People inside, listen up. You've been surrounded. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Don't resist and fight for leniency." Chapter 1006. Big brother, what should we do? In the stronghold, dozens of people surrounded the one-eyed man looking anxious. One of them thought for a moment and immediately said, "Why don't we take the small path behind us?" The one-eyed man shook his head and said in a low voice, "Have you forgotten what happened last time? That small path must be blocked by them now." Many of them trembled when they heard that. Last time, a few of them had tried to sneak away from the small path behind them when those people came in from the front. In the end, they were beaten half to death and hung from trees for several hours. Another person gritted his teeth and said, "Then we'll fight them. At most we'll fight to the death." "Fight to the death?" The one-eyed man looked at him and asked, "Do you think we have the ability to do that? Have you forgotten what happened the last time?" As soon as he said that, everyone's faces showed a look of horror. The last time, which was the first time those baldies had come, Dozens of people from the stronghold had charged at them, but they had been beaten by 3 people until they could not even get up. Their fists and feet were so fast that they could not even see them clearly. The Baldies were not the scary ones but the people they had brought with them. They could not beat them nor could they run away. What else could they do? Wait for death? Don't panic. The one-eyed man said in a low voice. If they want to rob us, it doesn't depend on what they want but what we have. We haven't opened for business for a few months. Tell me, what else do we have in our stronghold? As soon as he said that, everyone suddenly understood. That's right. Big Brother is right. We have nothing. What are we afraid of? The market had not been good for the past few months and they had not even opened for business. In the past month, the government had been suppressing the bandits, so they did not dare to act rashly. Now that the stronghold was about to run out of food, and there was not even rice in the porridge they ate every day, what did they have to be afraid of? Those people could not rob them, but they would not rob them, right? After dealing with them twice and exchanging information with their peers nearby, they already knew that these Baldies were very principled. They only robbed and did not kill. If they obediently handed over their belongings, they would not even hurt them. The stronghold was poor and did not have anything, so they could not be blamed. Big Brother was Big Brother after all. He saw through the essence of the matter at a glance. The bandits immediately felt a sense of respect for the one-eyed man. The one-eyed man looked at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Keep your eyes open later. If anyone causes trouble for me, they will be punished according to the rules of the stronghold. People inside, listen up. You've been surrounded. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Don't resist. Fight for leniency." Outside the village, a Baldi looked at another Baldi who was holding a paper tube and said enviously, "You've been shouting for a while. Can you let me shout for a while?" All right. The Baldi handed the paper tube to his companion and shook his head. "Look at your useless look, Lee." Baldi B took the paper tube and took a deep breath. Just as he shouted out a single word, the village gate opened from the inside. His face flushed red as he clutched his chest. Fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. Dozens of bandits stood in 2 rows and walked out of the stronghold. The one-eyed man who was walking in front turned his head and looked behind him. Everyone immediately bowed and said loudly, "Greetings, Big Brothers." The one-eyed man walked in front of the Baldi who was holding the paper tube and said respectfully, "Heroes have arrived. Please come in, please come in." Although they came here to look for trouble, they couldn't hit a smiling person. This person was smiling so brightly. No matter how unhappy he was and how sullen he was, he couldn't make things difficult for him at this time. Baldi B glanced at these people and walked into the stronghold with large strides. After everyone walked into the stronghold, he turned his head and looked at the one-eyed man. "Do you know?" Yes, we all know." The one-eyed man nodded his head fiercely. He looked behind him and said, "Why aren't you moving the things out?" One of the bandits immediately ran into the house and carried a bag out, placing it in front of the Baldi. After swallowing back the words he wanted to say twice, the Baldi patted his chest, calmed down and asked, "What is this?" The one-eyed man immediately said, "This is the last bit of food left in the stronghold. If you don't mind, please accept it. We haven't eaten for a few months. Life has been hard. There really isn't anything to show filial piety to you." The Baldi gasped a few times, stared at him and said angrily, "Shut up. From now on you are not allowed to speak." "Why?" The one-eyed man wanted to ask why, but when he saw the Baldi start to turn around and draw his sword, he immediately shut his mouth. At this moment, there were already a few people who came back from patrolling the stronghold. They shook their heads and said, "There really isn't anything. There isn't anything." The Baldi narrowed his eyes at the one-eyed man and said, "Don't we still have them?" Seeing the Baldi's lecherous gaze, the one-eyed man's heart skipped a beat and he subconsciously covered his butt. "Big Brother," he only said 2 words and the Baldi stared at his mouth with an unfriendly gaze. The one-eyed man was stunned, and the expression on his face became even more horrified. He quickly retracted his hand that was covering his butt and quickly covered his mouth. "Take them away." The Baldi waved his hand. Immediately, someone walked forward and tied up all the bandits, including the one-eyed man, with ropes. The Baldi looked back at them and said, "It doesn't matter if you've taken the wrong path. If you turn over a new leaf in the future, you will still have a chance to turn over a new leaf. He walked out of the house, turned back and said, "Move to the next hill." The results of the bandit extermination in Suzhou were gratifying. The speed and thoroughness of the extermination were unprecedented. Within 2 months, there were no traces of bandits within the borders of Shu province. It was as if the bandits had vanished into thin air, never to be seen by the people again. Some said that they had forsaken evil for good. Some said that they were driven deep into the mountains to be fed to the wolves. Some even said that they had escaped to the fringe and reclaimed their territory. No matter what happened to them, ever since the founding of the Jing kingdom, the banditry that had plagued Shu state for decades had finally been completely eradicated. When he first arrived in Shu state, His Royal Highness King Jing, who was deeply loved and respected by the people, strictly enforced the governance of the officials and eliminated the bandits. He single-handedly opened the curtains to a new era. Deep in the fringe in a mountain somewhere, dozens of houses were scattered all over the place. A man hurriedly ran into one of the houses and said in a panic, "Your Highness, bad news. Bad news." Inside the house, 2 men were chatting and drinking. The man on the left frowned and looked at him, asking, "What's the matter?" "Your Highness, the people we left in Suzhou have all been uprooted by the authorities. Not a single one is left." "What?" The man stood up abruptly and blurted out, "How is that possible? Did they find out?" Although he had escaped from Suzhou back then, he had still left a backup plan there. Many of his subordinates had disguised themselves as bandits, and other than a few trusted aides, no one else knew about this. There were as many bandits in Suzhou as there were hairs on a cow. How could those people be eliminated? "I don't think so." The servant shook his head and said, "This subordinate has also just found out that the 7 counties of Suzhou have carried out a thorough bandit extermination a few days ago. In just 2 short months, almost all of the bandits in Suzhou have been wiped out." "Really?" The man was puzzled. He then turned to look at the man beside him. The man was also puzzled. He murmured, "Impossible. It's impossible that no one reported such a major event." The man looked at him and asked, "When was the last time you came into contact with the believers in Suzhou?" 3 months ago, the man replied. His expression changed slightly as if he had thought of something. It was almost unheard of to have no contact with the believers for 3 months. To think that the bandit extermination campaign was so thorough. The man beside him had a gloomy expression. He had done bandit extermination before and knew how difficult it was. He asked, "Who is so capable?" The servant raised his head and looked at him. He licked his lips and slowly said, "Jiang of Silla." "Jiang of Silla?" The man was startled. He looked even more puzzled. "Who is Jiang of Silla?" Chapter 1007. Shu province was the territory of the Jing kingdom. This Jiang of Silla who came to Shu province to exterminate bandits was naturally a prince of the Jing kingdom. However, no matter how hard the king of Shu racked his brains, he could not figure out who this Jiang of Silla was. He knew King Qi, King Xin, King Jing, King Ning. He knew all the princes of the Jing kingdom except for this Jiang of Silla. How many years had it been since such a title had appeared? Your Highness. The servant stammered. He raised his head and looked at the king of Shu. Jiang of Silla. Jiang of Silla is Li Yi. The king of Shu stood rooted to the ground. He looked back at the servant with some difficulty and asked, "What did you just say? Jiang of Silla? Who is Jiang of Silla?" The servant pursed his lips and said, "Your Highness, Jiang of Silla is Li Yi. We live in the depths of the bedlam and do not have access to information. That Li Yi was conferred the title of Jiang of Silla a few months ago." Jiang of Silla, Jiang of Silla? The king of Shu revealed a shocked expression. Then he became a little crazy. Jiang of Silla. What right does he have? What right does he have to be Jiang of Silla? Are all the courtiers dead? Are all the members of the royal family dead? How could they let such a ridiculous thing happen? The servant panicked and immediately said, "Your Highness, please calm down." After a long time, the king of Shu finally regained his composure. He lowered his voice and asked, "He is already Jiang of Silla. Why did he come to Shu province?" The servant opened his mouth and said, Your Highness, this." The king of Shu looked at him and said furiously, "What are you stuttering about? Speak." The servant lowered his head and slowly said, Suzhou is the fief of Jiang of Silla. He has now occupied our former prince's mansion. The first thing he did when he came to Shuzhou was to reorganize the government and vigorously eliminate the bandits in Shuzhou. Shu Prefecture is now his fief, and he even occupied Ai's mansion? The king of Shu fell back onto his chair, staring blankly ahead. Shu Prefecture, that was Shu Prefecture. Not only did Shu Prefecture not belong to the king of Shu, but it had also become the fief of his enemy? He caused him to lose his position as crown prince. He caused him to be like a stray dog. He could only hide in the deep mountains, cut off from news, and face endless pests every day. Wasn't it enough that he caused him to be reduced to this state? Now he even wanted to invade his fief and occupy his prince's mansion. The king of Shu was trembling with anger. His eyes were bloodshot and he clenched his fists tightly. He hissed, Li, I will not live under the same sky as you. Your Highness, I still have some matters to deal with in the church. I'll be leaving first. The youth surnamed Fong glanced at him and left in a hurry after saying that. He had no time to care about the matter between the king of Shu and Li Yi. Although he had quite a grudge with that person, the most important thing at the moment was to find out what had happened to the believers of the holy religion in Shu Prefecture. According to his calculations, the last time the believers of the holy religion came to report, the news that Li Yi had become the Jiang of Silla should not have reached Shu Prefecture yet. However, 3 months had passed since then. It was impossible for there to be no news of such a major incident in Shu Prefecture. Damn it, what the hell is going on? He cursed and quickly walked out of the courtyard. A man in purple followed closely behind him and asked in a deep voice, Protector, what happened? The youth surnamed Fong said coldly, Who is in charge of the believers in Shu Prefecture? Ask him to come and see me immediately. A moment later, a man in blue knelt in front of him and said in surprise, Protector, I also found something strange about this matter and was about to go to Shu Prefecture to check it out. The bandits in Shu Prefecture had almost been eliminated. Although there were still some that had slipped through the net and it was difficult to catch them all, it was not a big deal. Even the capital could not maintain absolute security. The daily affairs of Shu Prefecture were handled by the newly appointed provincial governor Qin Chong. There was no need for him to worry about everything. In terms of governance, there would not be too many problems in a short period of time. The bandits that had been eliminated in the past few days were all sent to the fringe to pave the way. According to Li Yi's plan, he wanted to completely open up a trade route in the fringe. The Qi Kingdom suppressed trade. If the merchants traveling between the two countries passed through the prefectures, they would have to pay exorbitant taxes and various fees every time they reached a destination. It was enough to make them lose all their money. That was why so many merchants were willing to take the risk to pass through the fringe instead of using the official roads of the Qi Kingdom. Of course, the premise of all this was to completely solve the problem of chaos in the fringe. This matter had not reached the most urgent point yet, so there was no need to rush it. He had just arrived in Shu Prefecture, so he wanted to spend more time with his family and live a peaceful life for a while. Recently, Mississippi Lu had been busy opening up the new territory of the Lu League. Rui and the others spent their days chatting, playing cards, and doing needlework. There was nothing important to do. Ruoqing was quiet and indifferent, but in fact she could not stay idle. She would get sick if she stayed at home for a long time. Therefore, when she proposed to manage the brothel in Shu Prefecture, Li Yi agreed after a short consideration. He had just sent Ruoqing to the brothel. When he walked out of the room, he saw a young man sweeping the floor in the courtyard with a broom. In this day and age, the person who swept the floor was not necessarily a cleaner. It could be a grandmaster who had nothing better to do. It could also be a provincial governor who held a high position, or a core figure of a religion who controlled countless followers. Li Yi walked over and said, You must be Su Zheng. The young man heard the voice and looked up at him. He did not say anything and lowered his head to continue sweeping the floor. The fact that he did not deny it was equivalent to a direct admission. Li Yi sat down at the stone table in the courtyard and continued to ask, Have you taken over all the followers of the holy religion in Shu Prefecture? The young man said lightly, This is the secret of the holy religion. If you want to know, you can ask the queen. Without the permission of the queen, I will not tell you a word. You have already told me that you are Su Zheng. The young man looked at him and did not say anything this time. Li Yi threw a sign on the table and asked, Can you tell me now? Su Zheng looked up and the expression on his face froze. The blue dragon token. He was very familiar with the holy religion. He recognized at a glance that it was the blue dragon token of the holy religion. It was held by the blue dragon ambassador, whose status was only below the two queens. However, this blue dragon ambassador was elusive. Even his existence was a mystery in the holy religion. But it did not mean that he did not recognize the blue dragon token. The holy church was now split into two. The other side had a concubine and an emissary. They had thought that it would be difficult for them to help the concubine unify the holy church with only one concubine. However, they did not expect that the mysterious left emissary of the green dragon, whose position was even higher than the right emissary, had always been by their side. After coming to his senses, Zhou Xian put down the broom and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, left ambassador." Li Yi put away the token and said, "Can you tell me now?" Zhou Xian nodded and said, "After coming to Shu Prefecture, I have taken over all the followers of the holy religion here and got a lot of information from them." "Tell me about it." "The other queen is now in the Qi kingdom. She seems to be involved in the fight for the throne. The holy religion is supporting the first prince in the Qi kingdom. But there are more courtiers in the imperial court who are leaning towards the third prince. The situation is grim. The right ambassador has brought a group of core believers to the fringe to recruit bandits to strengthen the holy religion's influence." Zhou Xian looked at Li Yi and said, "And there is another unexpected news." Li Yi looked at him and waited for him to continue. Zhou Xian continued, "The king of Shu is also in the fringe and has close ties with the holy religion. After the king of Shu escaped, there was no trace of him in the entire Jing kingdom. Li Yi guessed that he must have escaped to the fringe. But he didn't expect him to collude with the holy religion. Is he trying to use this influence to turn the tables?" Zhou Xian looked at him and thought for a moment before saying, "To stabilize the followers, I need to borrow the left ambassador's green dragon token." Li Yi casually threw the token to him. Zhou Xian paused and said, "There is one more thing. Some of the followers in Shu Prefecture are living in hardship. In order to spread the Queen's grace and help them, we need a lot of silver. You can discuss this matter with her ladyship." Ruoqing was actually the head housekeeper of the family. Although the Li family was a large family with businesses all over the Jing kingdom, Li Yi hadn't seen silver for a long time. Before leaving, Li Yi paused and turned to look at him. He asked, "What is the purpose of all this?" "There is only one queen in the holy religion." Zhou Xian looked at him and said solemnly, "To help the queen unify the holy religion." Chapter 1008. Assist the Empress in unifying the holy religion. When Zhou Xian said this, his expression was solemn as if he was taking an oath. Li Yi nodded. Comrade Zhou Xian was a good comrade, worthy of being put in an important position. After liberation. No, after unification he should be promoted. At the very least he should be given a position as an emissary. Unifying such a large holy religion seemed as difficult as ascending to heaven, but it was actually very simple. Daoist nun was the only obstacle. As long as she was removed, the whole holy religion would be at their fingertips. They were the ones who spread the news that Ruoqing was the Empress of Heaven. Now all the disciples knew that there were two empresses in the holy religion. One of them was actually not the Empress of Heaven. There was only one Empress of Heaven. The previous matter was just a joke that the Empress of Heaven was playing with them. This was a contradiction, a slap to their own faces. A monarch must not joke and the Empress must not joke. If she violated this rule, the Empress would lose her credibility, and the huge force they had painstakingly built would collapse. This was not what Li Yi wanted to see, nor was it what Daoist nun wanted to see. Therefore, the big goal of unifying the holy religion could be replaced by a small goal. Getting rid of that Daoist nun. Su, who had recently gained some enlightenment, was very willing to do this. The only problem was that Daoist nun was far away in the Qi kingdom, so it was not convenient to do it. However, there was no need to be anxious. Li Yi believed that they would meet again one day. He even had a premonition that he and the king of Shu would meet soon. Deep in the land of Bedlam on a certain mountain. Li Yi, are you sent by the heavens to oppose I? This hatred, I and you are absolutely irreconcilable. Several people were standing guard outside the door. When they heard the sounds of dishes shattering and the man's roar coming from inside the house, they all lowered their heads, not daring to speak. Inside the room, the king of Shu's eyes were bloodshot. He smashed all the bowls and plates on the table into smithereens. In the end, he even overturned the table and chairs, waving his fists and legs at the air as if he had gone mad. The throne that was in his hands had flown away, his fief was gone, and now even his manor had been stolen by him. Just what kind of enmity did he have with that Li Yi for him to treat him like this? When he had just arrived in the capital, he had even treated him to a meal. When Feng Yu stepped into the room, the first thing he smelled was the pungent smell of alcohol. He frowned slightly and waved his sleeves. Only then did he feel that the smell had dissipated quite a bit. The king of Shu walked over quickly and said, "Ambassador Feng, you're here. Drink with I." Feng Yu looked at him and said indifferently, "That Li Yi took over Shu Prefecture and your Wang mansion. Don't you want revenge?" The king of Shu spat out all the alcohol in his mouth and said with red eyes, "Why not? I think about it day and night, even in my dreams. If I don't take revenge, I'm not a man." Feng Yu looked at him and said slowly, "That's why I'm here. You have a way to get rid of him?" When the king of Shu heard this, he immediately sobered up. He looked at him and asked with burning eyes. Feng Yu looked at him and said, "Shu Prefecture used to be your territory. You've stayed in Yong County for so long. You should know how strong the defense of Yong County is. With the protection of the Jiang of Silla and Li Yi, it's not enough to stop us." The king of Shu was shocked. "You want to attack Shu Prefecture by force?" Feng Yu shook his head and said, "It's just Yong County." The king of Shu frowned and said, "Although we can indeed shake Yong County if we work together, do you know how many people we'll lose?" Feng Yu nodded and said, "That's why we can't just rely on us." The king of Shu thought for a moment and asked tentatively, "You mean those people, those Baldies?" The Baldies he mentioned were the rising stars of the fringe. Of course, although he had been in the fringe for a shorter period of time than them, the Holy Church had been rooted in the fringe for more than a decade. In just 2 years, those people had swept away all the bandits in a radius of dozens of miles. Now, even the forces of the holy religion in the fringe were no match for them. Of course, it wasn't that their strength was completely useless to them. At least due to their influence, many small groups of bandits had joined them in the past 2 years. This had indirectly strengthened the fringe's strength. In the fringe, it was normal for there to be friction between the major forces. After several confrontations, they had won some and lost some, so they had formed quite a grudge with each other. Feng Yu nodded and said, "They have developed rapidly in the past 2 years. Now their strength is even greater than ours. If they are willing to help us, it won't take much effort to take down a mere Yong County." "But why do they want to help us?" "That depends on what they want. Silvermen. We'll give them whatever they want." The king of Shu pondered for a moment and his eyes began to shine brighter and brighter. Although those Baldies were detestable, they couldn't be compared to Li Yi. As long as they were willing to cooperate with him, he didn't mind giving them some silver and men. Moreover, the holy religion still had many believers in Shu Prefecture. When the time came, wouldn't that Li Yi fall into his hands? At that time he would definitely make him beg for death but be unable to do so. Feng Yu's eyes flickered and he said slowly, "This matter can't be rushed. Send someone to negotiate with them first and see what they will offer." The king of Shu nodded vigorously and said, "I'll send someone right away." The two talked in secret for a while more before Feng Yu walked out of the room. A man in purple followed behind him. After walking for a long distance, the man asked, "Won't working with this idiot spoil the plan?" "It doesn't matter," Feng Yu said, shaking his head. "He's very familiar with Yong County. Perhaps he'll be of great use when the time comes. However, the most important thing is those people. Go there and negotiate with them." The man in purple nodded and said, "I understand." Feng Yu looked up at the layers of mountains and a trace of darkness appeared between his brows. There was still no news of what had happened to the believers in Shuzhou. Even the people he had sent were like stones sinking into the sea. There was no news at all. Was this Li Yi's doing again? Wang Wei sat in his room and habitually rubbed his bald head. He looked at a similarly bald woman bustling about in the room, serving tea, and a sense of pride welled up in his heart. When he decided to shave his head and come out to roam the world, he swore in his heart that if he didn't make a name for himself, he wouldn't go back to see her. Along the way, he stumbled his way to where he was today. He had thousands of subordinates under his command, and the tigress had become a docile little tiger. He had achieved his original dream and even surpassed it. He became bald, but he also became stronger. His head had become the most conspicuous symbol on his body. There were even countless people who followed his example and shaved their heads. The bald heads formed a beautiful scenery in the fringe. Countless merchants were moved to tears, and countless bandits turned pale at the sight of a bald head. Although he had come this far in a short 2 years, he couldn't be arrogant. So far they had only achieved a little and occupied a small piece of land in the fringe. Their ultimate goal was to unify the fringe, occupy all the mountains, establish a new order and transform the fringe into a new world. He still had to carry out the guiding ideology of, to get rich, build roads first, have more children and plant more trees. He also had to rob more bandits and recruit more people. He couldn't let His Highness down, and he definitely couldn't let Big Sis down. Big Sis had given him a chance to realize his value. He wanted to help Big Sis become the king of bandits. Now they still had a long way to go before they could achieve their ultimate goal. At this moment, a young bald man knocked on the door and walked in. He looked at Wang Wei with reverence and said, "Big brother, there are 2 people outside who want to see you." Wang Wei scratched his head and said, "Let them in." Chapter 1009. Outside the room, 2 men stood with their hands by their sides. Ever since they ascended the mountain, their expressions had changed from arrogance to astonishment, then to shock and finally to caution and even a little fear, because this place was completely different from what they had imagined. Before this, they had looked down on these bald men from the bottom of their hearts. As people who had been steadily fighting in the fringe for more than a decade, overcoming all kinds of difficulties along the way, it was only natural for them to look down on these nouveau riches. They were merely a bunch of nouveau riches with an unstable foundation. Their rapid rise would eventually fade away like a meteor. In the fringe there was no shortage of such things. Moreover, since ancient times, it had always been those with more hair looking down on those with less hair, and those with hair looking down on those without hair. But after ascending the mountain, what they saw completely erased the contemptuous thoughts in their hearts. The top of the hill was flattened and the ground was paved with blue stone. There were rows upon rows of houses and rows upon rows of shops. Just now they had actually passed by a school. Damn it, they had never heard of a school in a bandit stronghold. What are they learning? How to rob and rob. If these things could be learned, then wouldn't they be able to find the reason why these bald men rose so quickly? Putting everything else aside, just the environment here was more than a level better than theirs. Could even be said that one was in the sky and the other was on the ground. One was a simple thatched hut, and the other was a luxurious wooden hut. One could imagine how comfortable these people slept when they were bitten by mosquitoes in the thatched hut. One was a muddy ground that would turn into a muddy puddle when it rained, while the other was a bluestone street where every stone was about the same size. It was easy to imagine that when they stepped on the muddy water and stuck close to the base of the wall, the rain would make the ground even cleaner on the other side. One was just a temporary place to stay and the other was a city in the mountains. They had a school, shops, medical centers, restaurants and brothels, but their side had nothing. This made the man on the left start to doubt his life. To be able to be a bandit to such an extent really made all his peers blush and feel ashamed. Humans couldn't be compared with each other and even more so with thieves. As for the slightly older man on the right, his expression changed from indifference to solemnity. Among the people he met along the way, there were 3 whom he couldn't see through, and they even gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Experts on the heaven list. The strength of those 3 people was definitely enough to enter the heaven list. In fact, their ranking on the heaven list would not be low. Where on earth did those baldies gather so many martial arts masters? Of course, this was a good thing for them as well, and it was sufficient to greatly increase their chances of accomplishing that great matter. The premise was that they were willing to work together. At this time, a young bald man walked out from a house in front of them and said lightly, "You can go in." The 2 of them walked into the room and the first thing they saw was a man and a woman, both bald. Men were born valiant and women were even more valiant. The bald woman glanced at them and walked out on her own. The older man cupped his hands towards the bald man and said, "Are you Commander Wang?" There was a tinge of respect in his tone. It was respect for the strong. Although the bald man in front of him wasn't strong, he had the power to shake the foundation of the holy religion in the fringe. "That's me." The word Commander Wang made Wang Wei's heart burst with joy. When he looked at the 2 of them again, he immediately felt that they were pleasing to the eye. He glanced at the 2 of them and asked, "Were you sent by that Fong guy?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Yes." "Did that Fong guy ask you to come over and surrender?" Wang Wei looked at them, nodded and said, It's not that I want to say this, but you should have done this a long time ago. You also know that with our strength, destroying you is as easy as pinching an ant to death. Since ancient times, a wise man submits to circumstances. These days there have been many bandits who came to surrender. Although you came a little late, you are still tactful. Little Six, come take them to register. The middle-aged man was startled and hurriedly said, No, no, no. Commander Wang, you misunderstand. We are not here to surrender. Not here to surrender? Wang Wei's face hardened and he said angrily, If you are not here to surrender, then why are you looking for me? Do you know that this commander is very busy and has many things to deal with every day? I don't have the time to talk nonsense with you. Next. The middle-aged man immediately stepped forward and said, We are here to do a big business with Commander Wang. Wang Wei shook his head and said, If you want to do business, go find those merchants. We don't do business, we only steal business. The middle-aged man continued, If this business is done, Commander Wang can have as much silver as you want and as many people as you want. Wang Wei stood up and said loudly, Little Six, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and serve them tea. They didn't lack silver, but they didn't want what they had. What they lacked the most was manpower, labor. Since they had silver and people, why couldn't they sit down and talk it out? The middle-aged man was finally relieved. He was worried that these people wouldn't listen to him. As long as they wanted something, he was confident that he could complete the task given to him by the protector. Wang Wei looked at them and smiled. He said, Tell me, what kind of big business is it? We will join forces to attack Yong County and capture Jiang of Silla. The middle-aged man looked at him and said in a deep voice, After attacking Yong County, you can rob as many people and as much silver as you want. We only want Jiang of Silla. Attack Yong County and capture Jiang of Silla? Wang Wei gave a look to the young bald man behind the two men. The bald man immediately retreated and closed the door. Wang Wei looked at them and asked, You want to, rebel? The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, What Commander Wang is doing now, isn't it also a rebellion? Wang Wei shook his head and said, With just the few of us, we are still far from rebelling. The middle-aged man said, We only plan to attack Yong County, not all the way to the capital. After we are done, we will immediately return here. As long as we enter the land of chaos, we will be invincible. What is there for Commander Wang to worry about? Wang Wei glanced at him and said, In that case, why do we need to cooperate with you? It is just Yong County, we can attack it ourselves. The middle-aged man smiled and said, We have spies in Yong County. When the time comes, we can work together. If it is just you, although you can do it, I think Commander Wang won't be willing to bear the loss, right? So there are spies. Wang Wei thought for a moment and said, Let me think about this. The middle-aged man nodded and said, This is a serious matter. It should be so. However, how long does Commander Wang need to think about it? About an hour. Wang Wei stood up and sent the two out. He said to the young bald-headed man waiting outside the door, Little Six, show these two guests around first. Also call the other leaders over. The young bald man nodded and extended his hand to the two men. Two guests this way, please. Chapter 10:10. Not long after, 3 people pushed open the door to Wang Wei's room. The man walking in front said, I heard that Fong sent someone over. What's going on? We'll talk about this later. Wang Wei looked at his thick hair and felt angry. He waved his hand and took out a deck of poker cards from the drawer. He said, It's not easy to stay here for an hour. Let's play cards. I want to win back all the money I lost last night. The man with thick hair curled his lips and said, You want to win back your money? Don't lose all your wife. Wang Wei snorted coldly. If I dare to lose, do you dare to take it? Thinking of the bald woman with 2 sledgehammers, the middle-aged man's expression changed. He said repeatedly, I don't dare to take it, I don't dare to take it. You'd better find someone else. 2 hours later, the two of them were led around the place. When they walked back, their emotions were even more turbulent than before. In the land of chaos, one could hear authentic Beijing opera, drink authentic liquor and eat authentic beggar's chicken. If one could sleep with an authentic girl instead of a trap, how could the land of chaos compare to any prosperous town in the Jing kingdom? When they walked to the door, they saw Wang Wei pushing the door open and walking out. Seeing Wang Wei's gloomy face, the middle-aged man's heart immediately jumped. He asked, Commander Wang, what's your decision? Damn it, I'll cut off my hand if I play cards again. Wang Wei scolded with a sullen face. The middle-aged man was puzzled. What did Commander Wang say? Wang Wei looked at him and said, I said if this deal is done, what do you want? The middle-aged man's heart skipped a beat. He looked at him and asked, then Commander Wang means, your proposal is very good. We accept. Wang Wei smiled and patted him on the shoulder. He said, it's a pleasure to work with you. The purple-clothed emissary was finally relieved. He also smiled. It's a pleasure to work with you. After bidding farewell to the bald men and returning to the stronghold, the purple-clothed emissary saw Envoy Fong and the King of Shu already waiting in the room. How did it go? The King of Shu asked. His expression was calm, but the anxiety and expectation in the depths of his eyes could not be concealed. Fortunately, I didn't fail you. He cupped his hands and bowed to the two, saying, they agreed to join hands with us to attack Yong County and capture Jiang of Silla. Alright. The King of Shu turned around abruptly and paced back and forth in the room. He even said the word good a few times. His eyes were even more ferocious as he murmured, Li Yi, oh Li Yi, we will meet soon. I hope you won't be too surprised when the time comes. Fong Yu sat down at the table and asked, what are their conditions? The purple-clothed emissary said, they want us to deliver 500 men to them first, as well as 100,000 taels of silver, before they are willing to join hands with us. If those baldies had agreed so readily, Fong Yu would not have been at ease. He would have been worried that there was a trap. However, after hearing their conditions, he felt much more at ease. Of course, when it came to discussing conditions, it was naturally impossible to make a firm offer. He thought for a while and said, tell them that we can only give them 250 men and 50,000 taels of silver. I think this is enough to show our sincerity. They did not lack manpower. In addition to the elites of the holy religion, there were also many bandits who had sought refuge with them in the past 2 years. He did not care about a few hundred people. 50,000 taels of silver was not a small amount. However, he knew that as long as they could conquer Yong County, the return would be 10 times or even 100 times more. Naturally, he could not be stingy with money at this time. The purple-clothed emissary bowed and said, yes, I will send someone to reply. There is no hurry for now. Fong Yu shook his head and said, this back and forth will take up a lot of time. Let's discuss the details first. The purple-clothed emissary nodded. Then he thought of something and said, when I went there this time I found one thing. We still underestimated the strength of those people. Oh? Fong Yu turned to look at him. Among those people there are many experts. Some of them even have the strength to enter the heaven list of martial arts experts. If we had fought them head-on, I'm afraid we would have suffered great losses. This is also a good thing. Fong Yu touched his chin and said, if we can all join our holy religion, then the fringe will be easily obtained. If we can also use those people in the north, then the strength of our holy religion will also increase by leaps and bounds. Whether it was those baldies or those lunatics in the north, they could not afford to provoke them now. Fong Yu collected his thoughts. The most important thing now was to capture that Jiang of Silla, Li Yi, and force him to reveal the secret of Tianfa. At the same time, he could also find out what happened to the believers in Shu province. If they could swallow the huge assets of the Li family, they would not have to worry about money in the future. They would be able to recruit more believers and Her Highness would be very happy. 500 people, 500 mouths. That's too much. But they can't just give us 250. It's inauspicious. Ask them for 10 more people. 100,000 taels of silver. 100,000 means 100,000. Not one copper coin less. If they are willing to cooperate, then cooperate. If not, then scram. In the newly built Jiang of Silla residence of the Li family in the capital, Li Yi held a piece of paper in his hand. He looked at it and said, and they asked when you are going to make a move? What do you think about before the new year? Before the new year, everyone is preparing for the new year and is not very vigilant. It is a good time to make a move. After we succeed, we can still have a fat new year. We should help them to the end. Should we also help them plan their route? After a while, Wang Wei touched his bald head and grinned. All right, then I will reply to them. After Wang Wei left, Qin Cheng walked over and said, the thing that the King of Shu regrets the most in his life is that meal he treated you to that day. Li Yi did not know whether the King of Shu regretted it or not, but he himself was quite regretful. He had wanted to live a carefree and happy life with his family in the capital. Who would have thought that just a meal would cause him to offend the king of Shu, the prime minister's residence, the Cui family, and the king of Shu and the Cui family's many lackeys in the capital? Step by step he was forced to this road of no return by them. He had to protect himself and move forward all the way. Now not only could he not turn back, he could only leave the capital and hide in this poor and remote Shuzhou. He even had to temporarily borrow someone else's place to stay. Such a miserable experience made his heart ache just thinking about it. From the moment you entered the capital, I began to pay attention to you. I saw you defeat the Qin family, the Chu family, the king of Shu, the Cui family, and even our Qin family fell at your hands. Qin Chong sized him up and shook his head. I really can't understand how someone as mediocre as Li Minghan could give birth to such a monster of a son like you. Li Yi glanced at him and indifferently said, Provincial Governor Qin, don't you have any shame? Your Qin family has fallen and you're blaming me? I wonder who was it that knelt before the previous emperor and confessed. As if thinking of something, he paused and looked at Qin Chong again. From the moment I entered the capital. Why did you pay attention to me? Qin Chong waved his hand and casually said, Nothing much. I just wanted to see what the young hero that even His Majesty praised endlessly was like. Li Yi looked at him. Is that true? Qin Chong nodded. Every word is true. Chapter 10-11. Paying attention to the young heroes was a lie. What he was really thinking about was how to kill Wang Cheng. With a straight face he said things that went against his conscience. As he rose in rank, his skin became thicker and thicker. It had been so difficult for the Li family and the Qin family to get to this point. There were some lies that should not be exposed. Seeing that he was willing to share his burden as the provincial governor, Li Yi decided to leave him some face. Qin Chong did not continue this topic. He sat down opposite Wang Cheng and asked, Your goal this time is the king of Shu? Li Yi shook his head and said, That's the opposite of what you said. The king of Shu's goal should be me. The result is the same. Qin Chong looked at him and said, They want to attack Yong County. Their goal is you and your goal is also them as well as the spies they planted in Shu province. They are no match for you, but if the two sides start fighting, the first to suffer will be the people of Yong County. You also chose to attack at the end of the year. If you can't control it, something big will happen. Catch a turtle in a jar and beat the dog behind closed doors. What big thing can happen? Catch a turtle in a jar and beat the dog behind closed doors. Qin Chong looked at him and shook his head. Since you already have plans, I won't say more. He changed the topic and said, About the lifting of the curfew, opening of commerce, attracting merchants from the two countries, lowering of tariffs and reducing part of the agricultural taxes, there are still some details that need to be discussed before it is officially implemented. 100,000 taels. Fang Yu looked at the purple-clothed man and asked with a frown, Did they really say that? They could fork out 100,000 taels of silver, but it was not a small sum to them. The Saint Church needed money to expand their believers and plan their operations. Although they could earn back the capital with interest if the operation was successful, he still needed to think about it carefully if he had to fork out 100,000 taels of silver. The purple-clothed man nodded and said, Yes, they said 100,000 taels of silver, not a single copper coin less. Otherwise, it would mean that we are not sincere enough and there is no need to talk about cooperation. Just as Fang Yu was hesitating, a voice came from the side. The king of Shu walked over and said disapprovingly, Isn't it just 100,000 taels of silver? If they want it, just give it to them. That Li Yi is rich. After the matter is settled, he will be rewarded 10 times or even 100 times more. What are you worried about? Fang Yu pondered for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, Then give them 100,000 taels. He lowered his head and looked at it again. A trace of doubt appeared on his face as he muttered, Why can't 250 people work? 260 people will do. It's just 10 more people. Is there a difference? It's just 10 people. It doesn't matter if there are more or less. Don't care about these details. The king of Shu shook his head and asked, What else did they say? Fang Yu continued reading and said, They said that they would choose to make their move during the new year. At that time the other party would not be on high alert, so it would be the easiest to succeed. They even found the most concealed and safest route. That's a good idea. The king of Shu nodded and said, Those baldies are not stupid. We should take advantage of this time to prepare. Show me the route. Fang Yu handed him a marked map. The king of Shu looked at it and nodded, saying, Not bad. This route is mostly in the mountains and there are no villages. Although it's a little difficult to travel, it's hidden enough. After we leave the mountains we will face the west gate. The west gate is the most dilapidated and the guards are the weakest. If someone cooperates with us and opens the gate in advance we can go straight in. Seeing this, the king of Shu suddenly slapped the table and said with a smile, "These Baldies are quite familiar with the defense of Yong County. It seems that we have found the right people." Behind him, a man nodded in agreement. In the 2 days before the new year, everyone was preparing for the new year. Even the guards guarding the city were not paying attention. It was the time when their vigilance was at its lowest. Even the king of Shu had praised the route they had chosen, so it could not be wrong. Those Baldies were indeed well-educated bandits. They had ideas, insights, and were very considerate and thoughtful. Shu Prefecture was the last inhabited place in the west of the Jing Kingdom. In the hearts of the people of the Jing Kingdom, Shu Prefecture represented remoteness and poverty. Because it was located at the border between the Jing Kingdom and the Qi Kingdom, those who did not know much about Shu Prefecture would always feel uneasy living there, as if the Qi Kingdom could attack them at any time. In fact, this was completely groundless fear. Shu Prefecture was adjacent to the chaotic land and had endless mountains. Even though it was adjacent to the Qi Kingdom, if the Qi Kingdom wanted to use Shu Prefecture as a breakthrough point to attack the Jing Kingdom, the inconvenient transportation would cause the entire army to collapse. This was also the reason why Shu Prefecture had only been plagued by bandits in the past few decades, even though it was adjacent to the Qi Kingdom. Precisely because of this, the city walls of Shu Prefecture did not need to be too high or thick. 20 feet was enough. The government also did not spend extra money to repair the city walls, because it was completely unnecessary. Yong County West City Wall. The western city wall of Yong County was already very dilapidated. Of course, this was only what it looked like from the outside. The walls were made of layers of black soil or loess, and were still very sturdy and durable. Fong did not understand why the son-in-law had come here with him today. This place was dilapidated. Other than the mottled city walls, there were only low-rise houses. There was nothing to see and there was nothing fun to do. Li Yi picked up a branch and casually drew on the ground. Fong looked at it for a while and finally could not help but ask, "Son-in-law, what are you drawing?" Li Yi pointed around and said, "What do you think about building a few shops here?" Fong looked around and finally understood what Li Yi was drawing. He carefully squatted down and looked at it again. He shook his head and said, "Even if we want to open shops and build workshops, there is no need to build the houses as high as the city walls. Moreover, these shops in a circle will look like an urn. It doesn't look good." Li Yi threw away the branch and said, "You don't understand. This is called a business district. A business district, a business district. It has to be in a circle." The son-in-law was rich so he could do whatever he wanted. He did not care and casually asked, "When do you want to build it?" "I will arrange for people. Start now. It must be completed within 3 months. The shops will open on New Year's Day." Fong was surprised and said, "So urgent. Is it difficult?" "It's not that difficult." Fong shook his head and said, "Just find more people and spend more money. I will arrange it. I guarantee that the task will be completed within 2 months." Li Yi nodded and said, "It's okay to spend more money. It's fine as long as it can be completed earlier. As long as you are happy." Fong shook his head. He did not know what a business district was, but he was sure that the son-in-law only knew some miscellaneous military tactics. He did not know what a barbican was. A barbican, as the name suggested, was a city that looked like an urn. Only important cities would build a small city in a circle around the city gates and build it as high as the city walls. This was so that when a strong enemy invaded, as long as the 2 city gates were closed, the enemy could be trapped. It would be like catching a turtle in a jar. When the time came, the choice of ambushing soldiers in the city or letting the archers shoot arrows, splash boiling oil, or throw stones on the city walls depended entirely on the mood. Shu Province was not a strategic location. Why would the son-in-law spend so much effort to build a barbican? Was he worried that the Qi Kingdom's army would cross the mountains and attack from here? There was an urn but there was no turtle. Chapter 10-12. The commoners who lived near the western city gate of Yong County discovered a strange matter these few days. Usually there wouldn't be many people passing by. In fact, most of the time the city gates weren't even open. However, there was a huge commotion at the foot of the city walls. At first they thought that the officials had nothing better to do and wanted to repair the city walls because they had too much money to spend. Later on they heard that they wanted to build a shopping mall, or something like a business district. They didn't know what exactly a shopping mall or business district was, but they roughly understood the meaning. The newly appointed provincial governor drew a large circle on the western city wall, planning to build a row of shops here. As for why they didn't build on the streets and insisted on surrounding the city gates, they attributed it to the provincial governor having a mental problem. Yong County already had a market square, and it was enough for the commoners to use daily. Why did the provincial governor want to waste manpower and money to build a bigger one? If this wasn't a mental problem, what was? But thinking about it carefully, it couldn't be said to be wasting manpower and money. After all, not only were the commoners not asking for money this time, those who came here to work could even receive 20 copper coins a day. That was 20 copper coins. To the commoners who only relied on farming for a living, it would take them a long time to earn it. This was like a copper coin falling from the sky. Coincidentally, it was the slack season now. If they didn't want to do such a good job, they would be as crazy as the provincial governor. For a period of time, the doorsill of the Yong County government office would be trampled by people every 2 days. The people who came were all commoners who wanted to work on the western city wall. After registering at the government office and being led by a bailiff, they would be able to receive 20 copper coins on the same day. The officials didn't reject any commoners who wanted to work. They would take in as many as they came. There was no helping it. The construction period was tight and the tasks were heavy. Those shops had to be opened before the new year. Right now there were only 3 months before the new year. In other words, they would need at most 2 months to finish the work. Otherwise, from the officials to the bailiffs, everyone would be punished. It was said that this was the idea of the newly appointed provincial governor Chen. The commoners were happy that they could earn money during the slack season, but the officials of Yong County didn't dare to say anything. They could only secretly curse that provincial governor Chen in their hearts. They had seen superiors who liked to cause trouble, but they had never seen one who could cause trouble like this. The officials and bailiffs of the workshops were responsible for supervising the construction of this project. Because they didn't have enough manpower, they had to borrow people from the other branches. Apart from the workers, the officials of the household were also having a hard time. They didn't know what was wrong with provincial governor Chen, but he wanted them to keep all the merchants in Suzhou as much as possible. This wasn't like supervising the construction of a house. Without a silver tongue and perseverance, it was impossible to do this kind of work. A bailiff of the Bureau of Revenue had just sent off a caravan. When he walked back to the city gate, he pursed his lips, which had become dry from talking too much. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice, "Provincial Governor Chen, damn it." As soon as he raised his head, he saw a guard at the city gate looking at him. He exchanged glances with the guard and shook his head, saying, "Provincial Governor Chen has racked his brains for the sake of the commoners of Shu Province. I wonder if his mother's health is good." Yong County East City Gate. A group of merchants stopped outside the city gates. The leader of the group, a rich man, turned around and said to a bald man behind him, "Brothers, thank you for your help along the way." The bald man waved his hand and said, "There's no need to thank us. If you want to cooperate in the future, you can look for us. You know how to contact us, right?" I know. The rich man nodded and said, "When we return, we will look for you, brothers." The bald man nodded and waved his hand, saying, "All right, see you later. Brothers, have a safe journey." After bidding farewell to the others, the rich man looked at the city gate of Yong County and couldn't help but smile. Ever since the fringe became easier to travel, they had to save a lot of money. According to the merchants they met on the way, the bandits in Shu Province had been completely eradicated. They no longer had to worry about all the goods and money they had spent so much effort to travel from the Qi Kingdom to Shu Province. In the future they could travel boldly on the road to Shu Province. From the fringe to Shu Province the people were good and the road was good. Whenever he saw the bald man, he would feel a sense of familiarity. This sense of familiarity immediately disappeared when he saw a man in a government uniform walking towards them. They could hide from the kingdom of Qi, but they could not hide from the kingdom of Jing. Suzhou was a place that they could not avoid. The tariff here was so strict that it was enough to make many small merchants shrink back. "Sir." The rich man smiled apologetically. Just as he was about to speak, the officer quickly walked over with a smile and asked, "Are you merchants from the Qi Kingdom?" The rich man's heart skipped a beat when he saw the officer, who had always been cold and expressionless, reveal such a terrifying smile on his face. There must be something wrong with this unusual situation. This officer was smiling so brightly. It seemed that they were in big trouble this time. He was nervous and said, "Sir, hey, don't be so polite. Come in, come in." The officer's smile became even brighter as he led them into the county. The rich man was even more nervous. Whether it was in the Jing Kingdom or the Qi Kingdom, the government always set up checkpoints to collect taxes. The Qi Kingdom severely suppressed business. The tax rate was 2 out of 10. As for what was 2 out of 10, it was also decided by the officials. Therefore, in the Qi Kingdom it was very difficult to do business without an official background. Ever since the reform of the Jing state's tax laws, under the condition that agriculture was stable, merchants weren't suppressed as much as they were in the Qi state. Instead, they were guided and encouraged to a certain extent. Therefore, more and more merchants from the Qi state were willing to do business in the Jing state. Of course, the people of the Qi Kingdom in the Jing Kingdom was different from the people of the Jing Kingdom in the Jing Kingdom. Merchants in the Jing Kingdom paid 1 out of 20 taxes. They had to pay 1 out of 10 taxes. Of course, it was still more cost-effective than in the Qi Kingdom. When they arrived at the official warehouse, the officer gave him a list after checking the goods. He was already used to this process. The list contained the total number of goods and the taxes they had to pay. The officer's attitude just now made him very nervous. He guessed that the tax laws in the Jing Kingdom had been changed again. He was afraid that this trip would be in vain. However, when he saw the taxes at the bottom of the list, he couldn't help but be stunned. In the Qi Kingdom, the government would value the goods and then convert them into silver. They would deliberately raise the price of the goods to increase the taxes of the merchants. In fact, the government everywhere did this. The only difference was that each was more black-hearted than the other. However, the number written on the list was more than half of what he expected. He had always paid more taxes. This was the first time that he encountered a situation where he paid less taxes. There was a trap, there must be a trap somewhere. Thinking of the officer's attitude, he was even more certain. This was a test. Must be a test. If he was greedy and pretended not to know about this and tried to deceive them, he might lose both his life and money this time. He looked at the officer and said with a serious face, "Your Excellency, we didn't hide any goods. These few carts are all we have. There's no problem with the valuation on the list. But the taxes. Your Excellency, could it be possible that Your Excellency made a mistake in the calculation?" Looking at the officer's expression, he didn't wait for him to speak. He immediately said, "Of course, Your Excellency, please don't misunderstand me. I absolutely didn't mean to criticize Your Excellency. Please don't blame me." Chapter 10:13. Wrong calculation? The officer was stunned. He looked at him, shook his head and said with a smile, "No, the calculation is not wrong. The provincial governor has ordered that from now on, the merchants of the Qi Kingdom will be treated the same as those of the Jing Kingdom. Your tax will be calculated according to the new system, no more and no less." The wealthy-looking man was rooted to the spot. The merchants of the Qi Kingdom will be treated the same as those of the Jing Kingdom? Who are you kidding? Even if you want to deceive me, you don't need to use such a poor excuse. This is the Jing Kingdom. How can the people of the Qi Kingdom and the people of the Jing Kingdom be treated the same? I'm afraid that they will arrest me for tax evasion as soon as I pay the tax. I haven't been here for half a year, but the officials of Shuzhou have become more and more evil. He looked at the official, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground with a thud. With snot and tears running down his face, he cried, "Sir, I beg you to let this lowly one go. This lowly one has an 80-year-old mother and an 8-year-old child. If anything happens to this batch of goods, this lowly one's family will have nothing to eat this winter." The officer's eyes were also a little wet when he saw him crying bitterly. He also had an old mother to support, a little child to feed and a squandering wife to spend money like water. For the sake of his mother's cooking, his child's snacks and his wife's perfume, for the sake of this month's performance, for the generous bonus, for the sake of a fat new year, he had to clench his teeth and hold on even if he had to talk until his mouth broke. They were all in the same boat. Why should they make things difficult for each other? He helped the merchant of the Qi Kingdom up and said seriously, "You don't believe me, right? Come, I'll take you to see the notice. It's written clearly on the notice. If you still don't believe me, I'll take you to see the county magistrate and let him tell you personally. Provincial Governor Qin is really a bastard. The officer cursed in his heart when he led the merchant of the Qi kingdom to see the notice. If it wasn't for the strict order of the provincial governor, he should be sitting at the door of the household and basking in the sun instead of arguing with the merchant of the Qi kingdom here, provincial governor's manner. Qin Chong, who was flipping through the files, suddenly sneezed. Third Miss Qin, who had just left the room, walked back in and reminded him, "The weather is slowly turning cold. Second brother, wear more clothes. Don't catch a cold." Qin Chong put down the file and nodded with a smile. "I understand." At the same time, the low-ranking official led the merchants of the Qi kingdom out of the county yamen. The petty official looked at the merchants of the Qi kingdom and said, "This is Xuzhou. Thanks to His Royal Highness Jiang of Silla's benevolence, he knows that it's not easy for you to travel far and wide. That's why he gives you such preferential treatment. You won't get such good policies anywhere else. Big brother official, I'm really sorry. I've gauged the heart of a gentleman with my own mean measure." The merchant of the Qi kingdom looked at the official apologetically and apologized. At this moment he finally let out a long sigh of relief in his heart. He even felt a little light under his feet. The fringe was no longer so chaotic. Xuzhou was no longer plagued by bandits. Even the officials of the Jing kingdom treated the merchants as human beings and gave them so much convenience. Wouldn't their business get smoother and smoother in the future? It's a small matter, a small matter. The low-ranking official looked at him and asked, "Where are you going on this trip?" The wealthy-looking man smiled and said, "We're going to Qing'an Prefecture first. When the time comes, we'll turn to the water route to the capital and sell these goods. Then we'll buy some things from the Jing kingdom and bring them back to earn some hard-earned money." Many merchants of the Qi kingdom made money in the same way as them. They sold their goods at two different places and earned a price difference. The price difference was not to be underestimated. If they were lucky, the profit from this trip would be enough to make up for 2 whole years of their stay in the Qi kingdom. They were in the cloth business in the Qi kingdom. Relying on the secret dyeing recipes passed down in their family, they had accumulated some family wealth. Initially, their business in the Qi kingdom was doing well. However, ever since the high-grade cloth from the Jing kingdom flowed into the Qi kingdom and started to lead the fashion, their business was greatly affected. Left with no choice, they could only become a traveling merchant. They traveled from the Qi kingdom to the Jing kingdom, passing through prefectures and prefectures. Fortunately, their cloth was unique. Even if they brought it back to the Jing kingdom, it would still be extremely popular. In the Jing kingdom, they also had regular business partners. "It's not easy for you to travel all over the country." The low-ranking official looked at him and said, "Since you'll be leaving in 2 days, it's fate that we've met. Why don't I treat you to a meal?" The merchant of the Qi kingdom looked at the low-ranking official and suddenly felt tears welling up in his eyes. When they were doing business in the Qi kingdom, the officials wanted nothing more than to extract all the oil from their bodies and pay taxes. However, when they were in another country, not only did the government voluntarily help them lower their taxes, the officials even wanted to treat them to a meal. Comparing the two in this Shu prefecture, he actually felt like he was at home. He sniffed and looked at the low-ranking official. He said solemnly, "Don't thank you for your kindness. I'll treat you to a meal. May I ask which is the best restaurant here?" "How could I?" The low-ranking official shook his head and pointed diagonally across from the yamen. "That's it." The rich man raised his head and saw that diagonally across from the yamen, the words Wuxia restaurant were clearly visible on the plaque. In a private room on the 2nd floor of the Wuxia restaurant, the two men chatted for a long time after 3 rounds of wine. The low-ranking official looked at the rich man and asked, "I heard from Brother Hu that you've come this time to buy cloth and clothing from the Jing kingdom. May I ask, are these things only available in Qing'an Prefecture and the capital?" "That's not it." The merchant of the Qi kingdom shook his head and said, "Brother Nya, you don't know this. Although other prefectures sell these things, we need a lot of them. You can only buy them in the capital and Qing'an Prefecture." The low-ranking official shook his head and said, "The one who doesn't know is you, Brother Hu. Let me put it this way. Whatever you can buy in Qing'an Prefecture and the capital, you can buy it in Xuzhou. Whatever you can't buy in Qing'an Prefecture and the capital, you can buy it in Xuzhou." The merchant of the Qi kingdom was stunned. He asked, "Why is that?" "Of course it's because His Highness Jiang of Silla has come." The low-ranking official waved his hand and said, "Let's eat first. When we're done, I'll show you around and you'll know." Alright brother Nya, I'll drink to you first. Cheers. After a while the merchant of the Qi kingdom stood at the western gate and looked at the crowd working in full swing. He asked in astonishment, Brother Nya, what are you doing? Are you building the city walls? This isn't building the city walls. The low-ranking official shook his head and said, Look, this circle of unbuilt buildings are all shops and workshops. They'll be finished in another 2 months. The higher-ups have said that this will be a shopping mall in the future. There are shops selling cloth, clothes, restaurants, cloth shops and inns. He looked at the merchant of the Qi kingdom and said, Even you can rent a shop here. There are merchants from all over the world here. If you want to buy something, you don't have to travel all the way from Shuzhou to the capital. Whatever the capital has, you can find here. Is that true? The eyes of the merchant of the Qi kingdom lit up when he heard this. 4 merchants like them, if they could skip the trip to the capital, they would not only save time and travel expenses, but they would also greatly reduce the risk. If they calculated it carefully, they could save more than half of their expenses. Moreover, time was money. Saving time was making money. The time they had to go to the capital was enough for them to make several trips between Shuzhou and the Qi kingdom. The difference in profits between the two was several times. Not only that, the government of the Jing kingdom also allowed the people of the Qi kingdom to open shops here. From the information he got from Brother Nya, it was obvious that Shuzhou encouraged and supported business. This was rare in other places. It was also a great attraction for merchants from all over the world. If this shopping mall was built with Shuzhou as the center, it would definitely be a place where merchants from the Qi kingdom, Jing kingdom and Wu kingdom would fight for. If they could open a shop here, it would be like making money sitting on the ground. Chapter 10:14. The merchant's eyes flickered as if he could already see mountains of gold and silver flashing before his eyes. He looked at the petty official and asked, Big brother Nya, do you think I can rent a shop here as well? First come, first served. You can reserve it after paying the deposit. The petty official looked at him and said, Today is fine, but in a few days there might not be any space left. The merchant from the Qi kingdom immediately said, Thank you, brother Nya. Where can I pay the deposit? I'll go now. The petty official waved his hand and said, No need to thank me. It's all because of the good policies. The merchant from the Qi kingdom shook his head repeatedly. If not for you, brother Nya, I would already be on my way to the capital. How could I encounter such a good thing? After paying the deposit, I'll reward you handsomely. There were still a few more to go for this month's sales. The petty official thought for a moment and said, If you really want to thank me, introduce some of your merchant friends to me. After paying the deposit, the merchant from the Qi kingdom came out from the registration area of the yamen. Once again he bowed respectfully to the petty official and said seriously, I can't thank you enough. If brother Nya needs anything in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. I won't refuse. You're too kind. The petty official waved his hand and said, Don't you want to buy cloth? I'll take you to the cloth workshop. I heard that the cloth workshop in the capital is the same one in our Shuzhou. Take a look first. The merchant from the Qi kingdom cupped his hands and said, All right. I'll have to trouble brother Nya again. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard the sound of an argument. That's clearly my customer. How dare you fight with me? What do you mean by your customer? Who told you to walk so slowly? Your sales for this month are enough. Can't you let me have one? Who wouldn't want to live with money? The merchant from the Qi kingdom watched as the 2 yamen runners dragged each other into the yamen. He looked at the petty official and asked, Brother Nya, this is. The petty official waved his hand and said, Don't worry about them. Let's go on our. Although it was the slack season for farming, the people of Yong County were living quite a fulfilling life. Every day before dawn, the strong men in the village would form groups of 5 or 10 and go to the prefectural city to build houses. At noon, they would be provided with a meal of noodles. Once they were full, they would return at night. Their wages would be 20 copper coins a day, paid on a daily basis. They couldn't even earn 20 copper coins a day from farming. They didn't have any other skills, but they had plenty of physical strength. They could earn 20 copper coins a day, and every few days they could still make up their minds to buy a pot of wine and 2 taels of meat to eat. Wu Laosen was one of them. The reason why he was called Wu Laosen was that he was the 3rd child in his family. He had 2 older brothers before him. One died not long after he was born, and the other was killed by bandits more than 10 years ago. He was the only one left in the old Wu family. Thinking of this, he felt that it was a pity. Second brother didn't have the luck to die early. Otherwise, he would have been able to witness this world without thieves. His Highness Jiang of Silla was the best. He did such a great thing for the people of Shuzhou. It was just that he wasn't a good judge of character. He found a provincial governor who was sick in the head. He built shops at the city gate and he even built them in a circle. But thinking about it carefully, if this provincial governor was normal, he wouldn't earn 20 copper coins a day and he wouldn't have the money to buy candied fruits from Su Fuji for his wife. Therefore, he found a provincial governor who was sick in the head. His Highness Jiang of Silla was the best. Speaking of his wife, she had been with him for so long, but she didn't have any good fortune. When the family was in dire straits, she had to weave cloth to make money to support the family. It was really hard for her. He took out the candied fruits that he spent 10 copper coins to buy today, pushed open the door and said loudly, "First mother, I'm back." A woman walked out of the room and said, "You're back. Come in quickly. I'll cook immediately." Wu Laosan walked in and asked with a frown, "Where did you go today? Why are you only cooking now?" The woman said softly, "Today the cloth shop in the city is recruiting people. I asked third aunt to accompany me to take a look. The cloth shop is recruiting people. Why did you go there?" Wu Laosan frowned and said, "You're a woman. Why don't you stay at home? Don't run around all day." He threw a paper bag on the table and said, "When it comes to earning money, us men will do it. Can you women earn 20 copper coins a day? This is the candied fruit that I bought from Su Fuji today. Try it. If you like it, I'll buy it for you in a few days." "I know." The woman opened the paper bag and said softly. Wu Laosan took a cold steamed bun and ate it. He asked casually, "Oh right, how much does the cloth shop pay you every day?" 300 copper coins. Wu Laosan took a bite of the steamed bun. His expression froze. He looked at her and asked in a muffled voice, "How much?" 3 copper coins? The woman took a bite of the candied fruit and said softly, "Everyone else pays 30 copper coins. I showed them the cloth that I used to weave. They said that I was good at weaving and the flowers were beautiful. They asked me to teach them how to weave. They paid me 300 copper coins a day." Wu Laosan was stunned for a while. He grabbed the kettle and gulped down the steamed bun. He put down the kettle and slammed the table. He said loudly, "You're a woman. Don't you feel bored staying at home all day? If there's a chance, you should go out and see more. Where's the cloth shop you mentioned? Bring me there tomorrow. They only hire women. Don't I know that they only hire women?" Wu Laosan looked at her and said seriously, "I'm looking for you to see if they're lying. Women like you are the easiest to be deceived. No, that's the workshop of the Jiang of Silla. They won't lie." Wu Laosan looked at her and then at the paper bag in her hand. He put the cold steamed bun aside and pursed his lips. He said, "Come, let me try a piece of the candied fruit." The pandemonium. Feng Yu put down a piece of paper and said, "Building a shop? What is this Li Yi doing?" He turned to look at the man in purple and asked, "Is the news true?" The man in purple nodded and said, "I've asked the local people. They want to build a shopping mall there. It's said that they'll be opening before the new year." They had lost contact with the messengers of the holy religion in charge of Shu province. This meant that they couldn't contact the believers in Shu province. If they wanted to obtain information, they could only ask the local people. Feng Yu frowned and murmured, "Why does it have to be the West Gate? Are you stupid? There are 4 gates in the east, west, south, and north. Only the West Gate is the most useless. It's not open all year round. If they didn't choose the West Gate, would they choose the other 3? The king of Shu walked over from the side and looked at him. He said, "You may not know this, but Li Yi's greatest strength is not in governing the country but in business. He should be making a good profit during the New Year's festival. Didn't he find a way to keep those merchants in Shuzhou?" Feng Yu shook his head. "I'm just worried. There's nothing to worry about." The king of Shu shook his head and said, "There are 3,000 soldiers stationed in Shu province. Yong County can only mobilize 2,000 soldiers at most. They're just a bunch of stragglers and are nothing to be afraid of. As long as your people can open the city gates, no one can stop us." "I know." Feng Yu shook his head and said, "But it's better to be careful." The king of Shu shook his head and revealed an excited expression. He said, I think it's best to wait until after the Lantern Festival to make a move. When he has earned enough money, we can slaughter a fat sheep. Chapter 10:15. The king of Shu postponed the day of action for half a month. Before the Lantern Festival, Li Yi could only accept it passively. He couldn't force him to do it with a knife on his neck, which would be too inhumane. Everyone had problems to discuss, express their opinions and compromise with each other. This was the way to solve problems. For example, he helped him plan the time and route. He thought it was better to take action after the Spring Festival. He also thought what he said made sense. They would meet at the Lantern Festival and the matter was settled. The following things were much easier. If Shuzhou wanted to develop, the first thing to get rid of was the closed or outdated policies after eliminating the corrupt officials, bandits, and the unstable factor of the king of Shu. At present, for ordinary people in Shuzhou, agriculture was still the most important and basic. It was related to whether they could have enough to eat and whether they would be hungry. On this basis, it was necessary to emphasize that industry, agriculture, and commerce should go hand in hand and develop together. That was what they had been doing these days. They lowered the tariff, attracted investment, cancelled the curfew, opened the night market, built workshops, and provided a large number of jobs for idle women at home. The goods produced in the workshops were sold to merchants from other countries. Shuzhou would become the first special economic zone in the Jing kingdom. Walking Rui and watching on the streets of Yong County again, it was quite different from a few months ago. The streets of Yong County used to be dirty and messy. Garbage could be seen everywhere and sewage ditches were everywhere. When they passed some roads, they had to cover their mouths and noses. Now the streets were cleaned by professionals. Although it was not spotless, at least it was not dirty and messy anymore. Of course, the Yong County government did this not only to implement the provincial governor's policy. Since the reform of the tariff and commercial laws in Shuzhou, it attracted merchants from the Jing kingdom, the Qi kingdom, and even the Wu kingdom in a short period of time. Shuzhou's geographical location was special. It was the place where these merchants had to pass to and from other countries. Now, after the reform of the commercial laws, no other state was more friendly to these merchants than Shuzhou. Every day there were goods from all over the world converging here. There was no need to travel everywhere. Anything they wanted to buy could be found in Yong County. Free trade. The merchants weren't the only ones who were happy. The officials of Yong County were even happier. Although the tax rate for foreign businessmen has been reduced, the total tax amount has increased tenfold. Those businessmen came here to rent shops, land, and workshops. Although they can't touch these silvers, they are still happy to see them. What's more, these silvers would eventually be used in Shu province. This included their bonuses. With a little performance, just the year-end bonus alone would be equivalent to a year's salary. Before this, they had thought that the new provincial governor Qin had lost his mind. Only now did they realize that it was His Highness Jiang of Silla who had a unique vision and foresight. I heard that His Highness Jiang of Silla is about to get married. I heard about it. In a few days, all the brothels in the city will have free performances for 3 days. Now we can watch to our heart's content. His Highness has only been in Shu province for a few months, but the officials have already become better. There are no more bandits. Life is changing day by day. My wife works in the cloth shop and can earn 30 copper coins a day. I only earn a few copper coins after working so hard every day. Sigh, you can just laugh secretly. We have been waiting for the stars and the moon for so many years before His Highness finally came. This time, we have to show our appreciation for His Highness's wedding. We have almost accumulated a basket of eggs at home. Although they aren't worth much, it can be considered a small token of our appreciation. Li Yi hadn't shown her face in public many times. Therefore she could walk with Rui and watching on the street without worrying about being recognized. Rui had said before that she wanted to pass down the kung fu of the Lu family. Li Yi asked Ruoqing to pick a dozen girls of the right age from the brothels. Now that she had nothing to do, she would teach them kung fu. Of course, she would also bring Drunken Mo and Ruoqing with her. Although Drunken Mo and Ruoqing had long passed the age of learning kung fu, and their achievements in this life were limited, it was impossible for them to become masters like her or even Mississippi Lu, who could dominate the martial arts world. However, with a master teaching them, their progress would not be slow. On the contrary, it made Li Yi, who had always been lazy, feel some pressure. If they became more powerful, it would be difficult for him to be a husband again. Ruoqing was fine, but with Drunken Mo's temper, It was hard to say what would happen after marriage. In the end, who would be on top and who would be on the bottom, who would be active and who would be passive. However, a man should be flexible, so he didn't need to care about these things. Drunken Mo's wedding dress had been embroidered a long time ago. Now that the former emperor had passed away, the 1-year period was about to pass. At the beginning of next year, it would be time to return the wedding that he owed them. Beside a small stall by the roadside, Rui and Ruoqing walked over, picked up an exquisite hairpin, and inserted it into Ruoqing's hair, saying, "This hairpin matches my sister quite well." Li looked at it. This hairpin was indeed exquisite. Judging from its style, it didn't seem to be from the Jing kingdom. Now in Yong County, merchants from all over the world gathered, and any small stall on the street could buy a lot of good things. Beside the two of them, another woman also picked up a hairpin. She turned around and said to a man in a yamen uniform, "Husband, this hairpin is beautiful. I want this one." The official frowned and said, "Didn't I just buy one for you yesterday? Why do you want it?" The woman grabbed his arm, shook it hard and said angrily, "No, I want it, I want it, I want it." Okay. The official hurriedly agreed. Now when he heard her say, "I want it," his legs would unconsciously go soft. What was a night of love worth 1,000 gold? It was all a lie. She was a good girl before marriage. How could she become like this after marriage? Habitually holding his waist, he looked at the merchant and asked, "How much is this hairpin? You really have a good eye." Seeing him pick the hairpin, the merchant's eyes lit up and said, "This is the hairpin that Empress Wendy wore on her head when she committed suicide. It's a priceless treasure." "Who are you lying to? Which empress committed suicide? If you talk nonsense again, I'll take you to the officials." The official glared at him. If it weren't for the county magistrate asking them to treat these merchants better, the lies he had just fabricated were enough to make him shed a layer of skin. "It's Empress Wendy of the Wu Kingdom." The merchant hurriedly shook his head and said, "Sir, you can take a closer look. This style, this material, it's really a real royal thing. If it weren't for the fact that this is the Jing Kingdom, I wouldn't dare to sell it." The official looked at him and shook his head, saying, "Just tell me how much it is." 1,000 taels. The merchant from the Wu Kingdom looked at him and said, "I might as well tell you the truth. This hairpin is the relic of Empress Wendy of the Wu Kingdom. I only dare to sell it here. 1,000 taels, no lower. Let's go." The official took the woman's hand and turned around to leave. 1,000 taels? 1,000 taels? He had to think about it. 1,000 taels? Even if he sold himself, it wouldn't be enough. The woman also knew that they couldn't afford it. After looking at it longingly, she could only sigh and leave. "Sir, don't go. Don't go." Seeing that they were about to leave, the merchant from the Wu Kingdom immediately said, "Another 2 taels, 998, how about 998? Hey sir, another 598, 498, 498. Wait." Li picked up the hairpin just now, looked at the merchant from the Wu Kingdom and asked, "You said that this is the relic of Empress Wendy of the Wu Kingdom. Do you have any proof?" The merchant from the Wu Kingdom was stunned. He did not expect that after one person left, another person would come. The young master in front of him seemed to be much wealthier than the previous one. Just from the clothes of the 2 female companions beside him, one could tell that. The official who had just turned around and left also stopped after hearing that. He looked back at the back of that person, wanting to see who was so stupid to spend 1,000 taels to buy such a fake. Chapter 10:16. The merchant from the Wu Kingdom looked at him and said with a smile, "Sir, you are not an ordinary person at first glance. Whether it belongs to the royal family or not, you will know when you take a closer look." Li could see that this hairpin was not an ordinary one. Except for the queen of a country, it was a big crime for anyone to use a phoenix hairpin. Few people had the guts to forge this hairpin and sell it. Judging from the texture and the fine workmanship, it did seem to belong to the royal family. Seeing his expression, the merchant from the Wu Kingdom was delighted and asked, "Young master, is it worth it to buy this hairpin for 1,000 taels of silver?" Li glanced at him and put away the hairpin, saying, "Didn't you say 498 taels of silver just now? I will give you another 200 taels of silver. So I want this hairpin for 500 taels of silver." "Sir, this." The merchant from the Wu Kingdom looked depressed. He really shouldn't have said those words just now. The official obviously didn't want to buy it. He shouted for nothing, but now 500 taels of silver flew away just like that. However, he also knew that it was not easy to sell this thing. It was a profit to have 500 taels of silver. He could only nod helplessly and said with his teeth clenched, 500 taels of silver, it is okay. Behind Li Yi, the woman just now looked at him and curled her lips, saying, 500 taels of silver for such a fake. Are you stupid? The merchant from the Wu Kingdom was furious. He looked at her and said loudly, what fake? Do you think this young master is as ignorant as you are? When the woman was about to speak, she found that the man next to her suddenly pulled her arm. Before she could ask anything, she saw her husband's legs go soft and he knelt down. The official looked pale. Looking at the young man in front of him, he said in a trembling voice, greetings, Your Highness Jiang of Silla. I didn't know Your Highness and offended you. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Jing, Your Highness Jiang of Silla. Hearing that, the woman's face turned pale and she also knelt down with her husband. As for the merchant from the Wu Kingdom, when he knew that the person in front of him was the famous His Highness Jiang of Silla, he was stunned and his body trembled. Where? His Highness Jiang of Silla, where is His Highness? I haven't seen what His Highness looks like. I'll pay for the hairpin at the Jiang of Silla's residence. Seeing that there was already a commotion on the street, Li Yi glanced at the businessman from the Wu Kingdom. With one hand holding Rui and the other hand holding Ruoqing, they quickly disappeared into the alley ahead. At first he was the one pulling Rui and Ruoqing as they ran. Later Rui was the one carrying them on each side as they flew in the sky. Only then did he get rid of the people of Yong County who were rushing over from all directions. He flew back to the Jiang of Silla mansion and sat in the small courtyard. He took a long time to calm down. In his previous life he had only seen such a scene when he passed by an airport and saw the fans of a certain A-list celebrity welcoming him. He didn't expect that he would have such a day. It seemed that practicing martial arts was the right choice. If he didn't have the ability to fly in the sky, he might not be able to resist these fans. In addition, he had to urge Ruoqing to practice martial arts, especially to practice lightness skill. The holy religion had 100,000 followers in the Qi Kingdom. Thinking of the scene, he was a little scared. Only the queen who could fly could control the scene. After drinking a cup of the new cocktail developed by Xiao Zhu yesterday, he took out the hairpin he had just bought. Li Yi was very familiar with the palace. Therefore, when he saw the hairpin at first sight, he knew it was not an ordinary thing. But he didn't expect that it was worn by Empress Wendy before she died. Empress Wendy was the former empress of the Wu Kingdom. After the current emperor of the Wu Kingdom killed his brother and father, she committed suicide. Now he was sure that Yang Liuqing was the princess of the Wu Kingdom. After the emperor of the Wu Kingdom usurped the throne, she fled the palace. Then this Empress Wendy must be Yang Liuqing's mother. Since he saw it, he naturally had to help her put away Empress Wendy's belongings. He would return them to her when he saw them in the future. Several months ago, the news about Yang Liuqing was directly cut off. Of course, it wasn't because something had happened to her. It was just that the Wu Kingdom was now full of heroes and chaos. The imperial court wanted to get rid of these people as soon as possible. She was the most important person to pay attention to. If she didn't hide her trace, the imperial court would definitely encircle her. Whether it was the Lu League or the brothel, they had no sources in the Wu Kingdom. Even the imperial court of the Wu Kingdom couldn't find Yang Liuqing. Of course, it was impossible for Li Yi to find her himself. Recently, Mississippi Lu didn't mention going to the Wu Kingdom. The Lu League needed to take root in Suzhou again. As the league leader, she had to deal with many things in person. Of course, more importantly, even if the two of them and the whole Lu League joined forces, they still couldn't compete with the country. Today, Mississippi Lu had already changed her rash temperament. Except for taking action when she disagreed with him, she didn't have that kind of irrational impulse anymore. In retrospect, she had really changed a lot in the past few years. But the biggest change was reflected in her cooking skills. A woman changed 18 times before she grew up, and a fairy fell to the mortal world. 2 years ago, looking at the chicken pieces that she burned into charcoal, he would never have imagined that one day he would miss the dishes cooked by Mississippi Lu. Fong poked his head out of the door and said, "Young master, there's someone outside. He said that you bought the hairpin from him and didn't pay for it." Coincidentally, he still had some details to ask the merchant from the Wu Kingdom. In case he made a mistake in the future, Li Yi turned his head and said, "Let him in." After a while, the merchant from the Wu kingdom walked over with fear and trepidation. He bowed respectfully and said, "Your Highness, I pay my respects to you." At this moment he was a little nervous. If the person who bought his hairpin was not His Highness Jiang of Silla, who was praised by everyone in Shuzhou, he would never dare to come to the prince's mansion to ask for money. He wanted to take the money and leave, but he didn't expect that he would be summoned by Jiang of Silla. Li Yi looked at him and said casually, "You really dare to come here?" Plop. The merchant from the Wu kingdom turned pale. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground crying, "Your Highness, I don't want the money anymore. That hairpin is a gift from me. Your Highness, please spare my life. Please spare my life." "Who wants your life?" Li Yi looked at him and said, "Stand up and talk. Let me ask you, since this hairpin is a relic of Empress Wendy, why do you have it?" The merchant from the Wu kingdom saw that Jiang of Silla didn't seem to be angry, but he didn't stand up. He knelt on the ground and said carefully, "Your Highness, this hairpin was secretly taken out by one of Empress Wendy's personal palace maids after she committed suicide. In the Wu kingdom no one dares to touch it. It changed hands several times and came to me. I thought that I might be able to sell it in Shuzhou." Li Yi asked a few more questions, and the merchant from the Wu kingdom answered without any hesitation or pause. He didn't seem to be lying. Moreover, with his eyesight he was sure that this phoenix hairpin was a relic of Yang Liuking's mother. "All right, you can leave." Li Yi looked at Fong and said, "Give him 1,000 taels of silver." The merchant from the Wu kingdom was stunned and said quickly, "Your Highness, did you remember wrong? It's 500 taels. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Then give him 500 taels of silver." The merchant from the Wu kingdom didn't look at his palm until he walked out of the Jiang of Silla's mansion. Suddenly he raised his hand and slapped himself hard in the face. In the small courtyard, Li Yi held the hairpin and carefully looked at it. Fong ran in again and said loudly, "Young master, there's a letter from the capital." Putting the matter of the hairpin aside, Li Yi opened the letters that had just been delivered by the courier station. Every month he would send a few letters to the capital and he would receive a few of them. He opened the first letter first. It was written by the old granny. She only told him about the current situation of the Li family in the capital. Everything was fine and she told him not to worry. She mentioned that Shuzhou was remote and chaotic and she warned him to be careful when he was outside. Then she asked about Rui, Ruoqing, Zumo and the others. She even asked about Xiaohuan and Rui. After asking about her baby great-grandson, she told him that they should quickly spread the branches of the Li family. In her lifetime she still wanted to hold a few more great-grandchildren. And Rui, Ruoqing, Zumo, Rui and Xiaohuan to spread the branches of the Li family. After all, the old granny was old and muddle-headed. She didn't even notice that something terrible had been mixed in. Chapter 10:17. After reading the old mistress letter, Li Yi called Xiaohuan over and asked her to show the letter to Rui and the others. The old mistress letter was not written for him. She did not mention him as much as Rui. The next letter was very short. The handwriting was rather immature. Duanwu had only been learning to read for a few years, so it was already very good that she had made such progress. The little girl used a worried tone to talk about the heavy workload that caused her to have no time to play during this period of time. She also said that the guy called Li Han was always bothering her, which was very annoying. The only time she wasn't annoyed was when he was explaining the math problems to her. For the time being, there were only 3 letters. The last one was naturally Li Xian's. Li Yi opened the envelope. After glancing through it, he shook his head helplessly. Li Xian, this guy, had thrown all the matters of the court to Emingzu. He had gone off to study soap bubbles, leaving Emingzu, a princess, to worry about the empress. And he still had the cheek to ask himself why the bubbles under the sun were colorful. Li Yi looked at Yongning, who was blowing bubbles in soap water to tease Li Duan. Even Yongning knew that it was the interference of light. 2/3 of this guy's letter was actually about this, and based on this he proposed 3 conjectures and 5 hypotheses. He picked up his pen and wrote on the paper, "To understand why the soap bubbles under the sun are colorful, we must first understand the wave-particle duality of light. Speaking of the wave-particle duality of light, we must mention the theory of relativity. And before we understand the theory of relativity, we must definitely not bypass quantum theory." When he reached the angle between the direction of vibration of the incident light vector and the direction of polarization of the polarizer, Li Yi could not continue. He then used one sentence to explain the principle of the interference of light, which caused the soap bubbles under the sun to be colorful. He then used a few hundred words to briefly describe the recent events of the past month. He asked about the situation in the capital. He estimated that 5,000 words should be enough. He put a few pieces of paper into an envelope and sealed it. The courier would send it to the capital at the fastest speed of 800 li. He looked at Fong and asked, "Just these 3 letters? Is that all?" Fong shook his head and said, "Only these 3. Li Yi lowered his head and said after a long time, "So be it." Ever since he left the capital, he could only get bits and pieces of information about Emmingzhu and Shaoning from Li Xian's letters. He thought they would write back, but after waiting for so long there was still no letter. Even the letters he sent were not answered. He still remembered that the day before he left, Emmingzhu held his hand and asked him if he could stay. He also remembered that the girl ran out of the palace barefoot and cried her heart out. Thus, his anger towards certain people in the capital, which he had managed to quell with great difficulty, rose again. Li Duan watched for a while and didn't want to watch anymore. He trotted over, held Li Yi's arm and asked, "Father, Duaner Mrs. Xiao Rui and Xiaonyang. When are we going back to the capital?" At the age of 2, Li Duan could already speak his mind in complete sentences. "In a few more days. In a few more days I will be able to see Xiao Rui." Li Yi picked him up and suppressed the anger in his heart. He asked with a smile, "Isn't Xiaonyang at home? Why does Duaner still miss Xiaonyang?" He only thought that Xiaonyang was what Li Duan called Ruoqing or Zreamo. Perhaps Rui taught him to call her that these days. "Xiaonyang is not at home. Xiaonyang is in the capital." Li Duan shook his head and said, "Xiaonyang will give Duaner candy figurines to eat." The smile on Li Yi's face froze in an instant. Zreamo and Ruoqing would not give him candy figurines to eat. The child was still young and eating too much candy was not good for his teeth. He gently put Li Duan down and picked up the letter sent by Li Xian. The letter said that there was a girl who stood on the palace wall every day and looked in the direction of Shuzhou. Every letter he sent would mention this sentence. The letter also said that she would read every letter he sent without missing a word. She was the person who would secretly give Li Duan candy figurines to eat. He lowered his head, touched Li Duan's head and said, "I also want to. When you grow up I will take you back to see her." Li Duan nodded and said, "Then Duaner should eat well and grow up quickly. When you grow up you will be able to see Xiaonyang." Li Yi's face was a little dazed. There was once a girl who told him that she would eat well, sleep well and do her homework well. She would grow up well and wait for him to come back. What the girl didn't know was that when she said these words she had already grown up. A bunch of bastards. Thinking of the faces of those people in the capital again, thinking of the girl standing opposite him and smiling with tears in her eyes, Li Yi's face darkened and his fists clenched. When Qin Chong saw Li Yi, he knew that someone was going to be in trouble. He stood up from his seat and asked, "What happened?" Li Yi's face darkened. "Write a memorial and hand it in. Say that suppressing bandits in Shuzhou has cost a lot of money and suffered heavy losses. Ask the court to allocate 1,000,000 taels of silver." Qin Chong froze and then looked at him in disbelief. 1,000,000 taels of silver? You're crazy. They won't agree. Li Yi looked at him and asked, "Either they agree to allocate the money or Shuzhou doesn't pay taxes for 50 years. Which do you think they will choose?" Qin Chong didn't need to guess to know which option the people in the capital would choose. Shuzhou had always been poor and full of bandits. Not mentioning paying taxes to the court every year, it could already be considered a good year if it didn't rely on the court's aid and not drag the court down. 1,000,000 taels of silver or non-existent taxes. Even an idiot would know which to choose. The court was full of smart people, so they would definitely choose the second option. The result of choosing this path was that they would be ridiculed by their descendants for 50 years, because the Shuzhou of today was no longer the Shuzhou of yesterday. The Shuzhou of tomorrow was no longer the Shuzhou of today. In the entire world, no one dared to make such a request to the court, but unfortunately the person before him was one of them. The court had to choose one of the 2 options he gave. Once they made a choice they had to abide by it. As long as he was alive he could not go back on his word. The capital hibiscus garden. Li Xian sat by the lake, comfortably lying on a rocking chair. He gazed at the soap bubbles floating in the air, changing colors under the sunlight. A eunuch stood behind him, blowing soap bubbles with great effort. Because he had been blowing for too long, his face was pale, his entire body was dizzy, and he wanted to vomit. Another eunuch ran over from a distance. When he was still several dozen zhang away, he shouted, Your Majesty, Jiang of Silla has replied, Jiang of Silla has replied. He has replied. Li Xian bounced up from the rocking chair, his face lit up with joy, and he strode over. The eunuch who was blowing bubbles felt as if he had been pardoned. He leaned against a tree behind him, breathing in big mouthfuls of fresh air. Li Xian snatched the letter from the eunuch's hand and tore it open carefully. Then he sat back on the rocking chair and started reading. Wave-particle duality of light, general theory of relativity, quantum theory, Schrödinger's cat, Murphy's law, Al-Hospital's law. Li Xian stood up from the rocking chair, a thoughtful look on his face. He took the letter back to his room, took out a pen and paper and started writing and calculating. Sometimes he bit the tip of the pen, his brows furrowed, and sometimes he laughed out loud, slamming the table as if he had gone mad.